The blizzard came without warning, the way life-changing moments often do. One moment I was driving down the mountain pass, headlights carving a narrow path through the evening darkness, radio crackling with the last fragments of civilization before the signal faded entirely. The next white, nothing but white everywhere, the snow falling so thick it seemed to swallow the world whole. The flakes didn't drift. They attacked, slamming against my windshield like they had a personal vendetta. My knuckles turned bloodless against the steering wheel as I hunched forward, squinting through glass that was losing its battle against the storm. Each breath fogged the air inside my ancient Honda, the temperature dropping steadily since the heater had sputtered and died 20 minutes ago. Just a little further, I whispered to myself, needing to hear something beyond the howling wind and the anxious thunder of my heartbeat. The cabin can't be much farther. The cabin, my last resort, my hiding place, the final sanctuary in a world that had turned hostile without warning. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have recognized the woman I'd become, jumping at shadows, sleeping in cheap motels with doors barricaded by furniture, paying for everything in cash, changing my appearance weekly, cutting off my chestnut waves into a choppy, platinum blonde bob had been the hardest part. Nathan had loved my hair. He used to wind it around his fingers when we lay together in bed, planning our future in whispers. But 3 months ago, I hadn't watched my fiancé die in a hit and run that wasn't really an accident. I hadn't stood in the rain at his funeral, watching men in dark suits observing from a distance instead of approaching to offer condolences. I hadn't found the strange documents hidden in his office safe when I'd gone to collect his personal items, documents filled with chemical formulas and test subject numbers and horrifying side effects. I hadn't realized that the pharmaceutical company he worked for, Cerulean Labs, was conducting experiments they'd kill to keep secret, and I certainly hadn't become a target myself. The road curved sharply for the conditions. I tapped the brakes gently, the way my father had taught me during Minnesota winters, but it didn't matter. Black ice lurked beneath the fresh powder, and my tires lost their grip instantly. I gasped as the car slid sideways, the world spinning in a sickening blur of white and shadow. Time stretched like taffy, each second expanding to contain its own universe of terror. I had time to notice everything: how the seat belt cut into my chest, how my coffee tumbled from the cup holder in slow motion, how my own scream sounded distant and detached, like it belonged to someone else. Metal crunched, glass spider-webbed in hypnotic patterns. Pain exploded across my forehead as it met the steering wheel with enough force to send stars dancing across my vision. Then stillness, complete and absolute, except for the soft hiss of snow against metal. The car had wedged itself into a snowbank, half tilted toward a ravine. I could barely make out through the passenger window. 15 more feet, and I would have plunged into darkness. I touched my temple gingerly. Blood trickled warm down my skin, the coppery scent filling my nostrils. My breath came in short, panicked bursts that fogged the cracked windshield. Outside, the storm howled, as if laughing at my predicament. "Think, Elise," I muttered, willing my racing heart to slow. "Think." I knew I couldn't stay here. The temperature was dropping fast, and the Honda wasn't going anywhere. Uncle Jack's hunting cabin was somewhere in these woods, a place I hadn't visited since childhood summers spent catching fireflies and learning to fish. The perfect place to disappear, to sort through everything I'd taken from Nathan's office. Maybe even find something to bargain with, something that would make them stop hunting me, if I could just reach it. With trembling fingers, I gathered my backpack stuffed with what little I had left. Clothes, toiletries, the stolen files wrapped in waterproof plastic, and the one luxury I couldn't bear to leave behind, a small framed photo of Nathan and me from our trip to Sedona last spring. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners, his smile, still uninhibited by the knowledge that would eventually kill him. I pulled on my gloves, cheap things from a gas station, not meant for serious winter weather, and tightened the scarf around my neck before forcing the driver's side door open against the weight of accumulated snow. The cold hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and slapping color into my cheeks. Wind clawed at my face with icy fingers as I stumbled from the wreck, my boots sinking ankle deep into the fresh powder. Each inhale felt like swallowing glass, the frigid air burning my lungs. The forest loomed dark and dense beyond the road, a wall of pine sentinels standing silent watch. Somewhere in that maze of tree and shadow lay safety, if I could find it before hypothermia set in. If I could find it before whoever was tracking me realized I'd gone off-grid. one foot in front of the other. I told myself, the mantra that had kept me going since Nathan's death. Just keep moving. I started walking, using my phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. The snow was already covering my tracks behind me, erasing any evidence of my passage. In another context, I might have found it beautiful the way the flakes caught the light, how they transformed the ordinary world into something ethereal and silent. But beauty offers little comfort when you're running for your life. 20 minutes later, my limbs were growing numb, and panic was setting in. Nothing looked familiar. The pines stood like sentinels, identical in their winter dress, offering no clues to orientation. My light caught only endless curtains of white, the snowfall so thick now that visibility had shrunk to mere feet. My phone battery dipped below 15%, a warning I couldn't afford to ignore. Without GPS signal, it was useless for navigation. But that flashlight was my only defense against complete darkness. Please, I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. Nathan? God? The indifferent universe? I need help. That's when I heard it, a low growl that cut through the storm's wail like a knife through silk. I froze, the sound triggering something primitive in my brain. Prey instinct. The tiny hairs on my neck stood at attention as adrenaline flooded my system. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it in a frantic arc around me, their two eyes reflecting back, glowing amber in the darkness between trees. Not the flat reflection of ordinary animal eyes, but something that seemed lit from within, like banked coals waiting to ignite. Hello? My voice emerged small and strangled. Is someone there? The growl came again, deeper this time, resonating in my chest as if I were feeling it rather than hearing it. Not human. Not remotely. Wolf. But wolves hadn't been seen in these mountains for decades. Everyone knew that. Uncle Jack had complained about it during our fishing trips, lamenting the loss of apex predators to human encroachment and hunting. Unless, the beam of light finally caught the creature fully, and my breath hitched. It was massive, far larger than any wolf I'd ever seen in nature documentaries or zoo exhibits. Its shoulders stood nearly to my waist, its head broader and more powerful than seemed possible. Its fur was pitch black, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it, except for a jagged streak of silver that ran from between its eyes down its muzzle like a lightning bolt. And those eyes, they weren't just animal. They held an intelligence that made my skin crawl with recognition. They looked at me not as prey, but as something specific, something identified, something found. I stumbled backward, snow crunching beneath my boots. The wolf matched my movement with unsettling precision, stalking forward with deliberate grace. Blood matted its left flank, dark against the black fur, a long gash that looked suspiciously like a bullet wound. It was injured. And yet it moved without hesitation, powerful muscles bunching beneath its thick coat as it closed the distance between us. Each step was silent, despite the snow, a predator's approach perfected through millennia of evolution. Run! My mind screamed. But where? Into deeper snow, deeper woods, in a storm that was quickly becoming a whiteout. I was already lost, already freezing. My phone battery now read 10%, the light noticeably dimmer. The wolf stopped mere feet away, its breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Steam rose from its massive body as if a fire burned beneath that midnight fur. Despite the cold numbing my extremities, I could feel heat radiating from the creature, impossible heat that defied the physics of flesh and blood. Those amber eyes held mine. And something passed between us, a jolt of recognition so strong it nearly buckled my knees. Not fear, though fear was certainly there. Something else, something that felt ancient and new all at once. Like remembering a place I'd never been, a strange thought surfaced in my mind. Unbidden and unwelcome, I know you. The wolf whined, a sound so unexpectedly vulnerable it startled me. It lowered its massive head in what almost seemed like deference. Then it turned slightly to reveal its wounded side. The injury looked worse up close, a deep gash that had torn through muscle, still seeping blood that melted small crimson holes in the snow. You're hurt, I whispered. The absurdity of speaking to a wolf not lost on me. Yet something compelled me to continue, as if the creature might actually understand. Who did this to you? It huffed, a cloud of vapor escaping its muzzle, almost like a sigh of frustration. Then it turned and took several steps away before looking back at me expectantly. Its intention unmistakable despite the species barrier. Follow me, the wind howled, cutting through my coat like it was made of paper. My fingers had gone from painful to worryingly numb, the early stages of frostbite setting in. The blood on my temple had frozen into a tacky crust. The rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive these past 3 months, screamed that following a wild predator into the woods was insanity. But as the wolf waited, patient, and somehow knowing, I realized I had no better options. Stay here and freeze, or follow the impossible creature that seemed intent on leading me somewhere. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible above the storm. Show me. The wolf's ears pricked forward. Something shifted in its posture, a release of tension, a certainty. It turned and began moving through the snow, its powerful body carving a path I could follow. Every few steps, it would pause, looking back to ensure I was still behind it. As we moved deeper into the forest, the strangest sensation settled over me, not safety, exactly, but inevitability. Like I was being drawn by an invisible thread that had somehow always been there, waiting to pull taut. The feeling was both terrifying and oddly comforting, like slipping into a dream I'd had 1,000 times before. My phone died with a final, pathetic flash, plunging us into darkness, broken only by the faint blue glow of snow reflecting moonlight that somehow penetrated the storm clouds. I should have been paralyzed with fear, but the wolf seemed to sense my distress. It moved closer, its body heat a beacon in the freezing night. I don't understand, I murmured, more to myself than the wolf. Why are you helping me? The creature merely continued forward, purpose in every step, following a hidden trail only it could perceive, leading me deeper into mystery with each passing minute. I didn't know where this massive, wounded wolf was leading me, or why it had appeared exactly when I needed guidance most. I didn't understand the odd familiarity I felt when those amber eyes met mine, or why my heart seemed to recognize something my mind could not comprehend. But as we trudged through the deepening snow, one thought kept circling in my increasingly foggy mind. Nothing about this encounter was coincidence. Nothing about the way those amber eyes had found mine in the darkness. The way they had seen through me as if reading a familiar story. And nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Time lost meaning as I followed the wolf through the blizzard. Minutes bled into what might have been hours, my thoughts growing as numb as my extremities. The cold had worked its way past my skin, past muscle, settling deep in my bones like it belonged there. Each breath burned. Each step became an act of defiance against my body's desperate plea to simply stop, to rest, to sleep. I knew enough about hypothermia to recognize the danger. The moment you start feeling warm in a freezing environment, you're dying. And I was starting to feel warm. The wolf seemed to sense my fading strength. It circled back, pressing its massive body against my legs, nudging me forward with surprising gentleness. Steam rose from its midnight fur, that impossible heat the only thing keeping me conscious. I can't, I whispered, my voice thin and broken on the wind. I can't go any further. The wolf growled, not threatening, but insistent. Its amber eyes held mine, and in them I saw not just intelligence but fierce determination. It butted its head against my hip, nearly knocking me over, then stood waiting with unmistakable impatience. Easy for you, I muttered. You have a fur coat. Was I hallucinating now? Arguing with a wolf in the middle of a blizzard? Maybe I was already dead, trapped in some strange purgatory where massive wolves served as guides to wherever came next. The thought startled a laugh from me, a brittle, half-hysterical sound that was swallowed immediately by the howling wind. The wolf's ears pricked forward suddenly. It lifted its muzzle, nostrils flaring as it tested the air. Then it looked at me with renewed urgency, nudging harder, forcing me to stumble forward. What is it? I asked, alarmed by the change. Is something coming? Instead of answering as if it could, the wolf surged ahead, breaking trail with increased speed. I followed, my survival instinct overriding exhaustion. We crested a small rise, and through the curtain of snow, I finally saw it, a pinprick of golden light in the distance. A window, a building, shelter. Hope sent fresh adrenaline coursing through my veins. I pushed forward with renewed determination, keeping my eyes fixed on that distant glow, like a sailor following a lighthouse beacon. As we drew closer, the structure took shape, not the rustic hunting cabin I'd been seeking, but something larger, more solid. A proper house, built of dark timber and stone, its roof already blanketed in white. The wolf led me to a covered porch that wrapped around one side of the structure. The moment we stepped under the shelter, out of the direct assault of the storm, my knees buckled. I caught myself against a rough-hewn pillar, breathing hard, watching as the wolf shook snow from its coat in a violent shudder. Is this? Do you live here? I asked, feeling foolish even as the words left my mouth. The wolf ignored my question, padding to a heavy wooden door and scratching at it with one massive paw. When nothing happened, it turned to me with what I could only describe as an expectant expression. "You want me to knock?" I asked, incredulous. It huffed, breath clouding in the cold air. I hesitated, suspicion suddenly cutting through my fog of exhaustion. What if I was walking into a trap? What if whoever lived here was connected to Cerulean Labs? My fingers instinctively found the zipper of my backpack, where the stolen files lay hidden, but the alternative was freezing to death on this porch. I had no other options. With trembling fingers, I raised my hand and knocked 3 sharp raps that seemed to echo through the stillness. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, desperation lending strength to my numbed hands. Still nothing. The wolf growled softly, pushing past me to scratch at the door again, more insistently. Then it looked up at me and back at the door with unmistakable meaning. "It's locked," I said, testing the handle to prove my point. The wolf's response was to butt its head against my hip, pushing me aside. It rose on its hind legs, an alarming sight that made me stumble back, and pressed one paw against what I now realized was a small ledge above the doorframe. Something metallic clattered to the porch floor. A key. I stared at the wolf, then at the key, my exhausted brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't normal animal behavior. This was impossible. With shaking hands, I picked up the key and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, the door swinging open to reveal darkness beyond. The wolf didn't hesitate, limping past me into the house. After a moment's hesitation, I followed, closing the door behind me against the howling storm. The interior was pitch black and achingly still. The air smelled of wood smoke, pine, and something else, a musky, masculine scent I couldn't identify. I fumbled along the wall until my fingers found a light switch. Warm light flooded the space, revealing a large open room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold ashes in its hearth. Rustic but comfortable furniture was arranged around it: a leather sofa, a reading chair, a coffee table made from a slice of massive tree trunk. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes whose spines I couldn't read from where I stood. A kitchen area occupied the far end of the room, all dark wood and gleaming copper pots hanging from a rack. It was beautiful, isolated, and utterly unfamiliar. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding small in the empty space. "Is anyone home?" No answer came. The wolf had already crossed to the fireplace, where it was now pawing at a stack of logs beside the hearth, its intentions clear. "You want me to light a fire?" The creature looked at me as if I'd stated the painfully obvious, moving mechanically, still half convinced I was hallucinating. I knelt by the fireplace. My hands were clumsy with cold as I arranged kindling and smaller logs, grateful to find matches in a copper bowl on the mantel. It took 3 tries with trembling fingers, but finally, a flame caught, growing steadily as it consumed the dry wood. Heat, blessed, beautiful heat, began radiating outward. I sat back on my heels, holding my hands toward the flames, wincing as sensation returned in painful prickles. Only then did I remember the wolf's injury. I turned to check on it, but the wolf had disappeared. "Hello?" I called again, alarm raising the pitch of my voice. "Where did you go?" The creak of floorboards from somewhere above made me freeze. Footsteps, human footsteps, moved across the ceiling. Someone else was in the house. Fear shot through me, instantly overwhelming exhaustion. I scrambled to my feet, looking frantically for a weapon, finding nothing better than a heavy iron poker beside the fireplace. I gripped it tightly, backing toward the door, ready to flee back into the storm if necessary. The footsteps descended what must have been stairs at the back of the house, growing louder. I raised the poker, heart hammering against my ribs. A man appeared in the doorway across the room, tall, extraordinarily so, with broad shoulders that filled the frame. Shirtless, wearing only low-slung jeans that revealed a torso carved from solid muscle. His hair was black as midnight, falling in damp waves to his shoulders. A jagged streak of silver cut through it on one side, like a lightning bolt, just like the wolf's marking. But it was his eyes that stole my breath, burning amber. Exactly the same impossible shade as the wolf's had been. They locked onto mine with the same intensity, the same recognition. I knew in that instant. Knew, and yet couldn't process what I knew. "You," I whispered, the poker slipping from nerveless fingers to clatter against the stone hearth. "Me," he agreed, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated in my chest. He took a step forward, then winced, his his hand going to his left side where a fresh white bandage was taped, blood already seeping through to stain it crimson, exactly where the wolf had been wounded. That's not possible, I said, backing away until I hit the door. You can't be the wolf? His mouth curved into something too grim to be a smile. And yet, here we are. My head spun. The room tilted dangerously, exhaustion and shock finally overwhelming my system. I was hallucinating. Had to be. Men didn't turn into wolves. Wolves didn't lead strangers to safety through blizzards. You're bleeding, I said stupidly, fixating on the only concrete reality I could process. Bullet wound, he replied, taking another careful step forward. Silver, not enough to kill me, but enough to slow me down when I needed speed most. Who? My tongue felt thick, unwieldy. Who shot you? The same people who are hunting you, Elise Morgan. His use of my name hit like a physical blow. The same people who killed your fiancé when he discovered what they were really doing at Cerulean Labs. The same people who will find us both if we don't leave here by morning. The room swayed more violently. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. How do you know my name? I whispered. He was closer now, close enough that I could feel that impossible heat radiating from him, just as it had from the wolf. Close enough to see a scar that slashed across his left eyebrow, another that curved along his jaw. Close enough to smell pine and smoke and something wild that made my heart race with instinctive recognition. Because I've been looking for you, he said softly, his amber eyes never leaving mine. For longer than you can imagine. The world tilted one final time, darkness rushing in from all sides. The last thing I felt were strong arms catching me as I fell, cradling me against a chest that burned like fire in the frozen night. The last thing I heard was his voice, low and urgent against my ear. And now I've found you, little fox. Heaven help us both. I woke to warmth and the gentle crackling of a fire. For one blissful moment, the world felt right, soft blankets against my skin, the weight of exhaustion lifted from my bones. Then memory flooded back in brutal waves. The blizzard, the crash, the wolf with amber eyes, the man who was somehow both. My eyes flew open. I was on the leather sofa, wrapped in a thick quilt that smelled of pine and wood smoke. The fireplace still burned steadily, casting dancing shadows across unfamiliar walls. Dawn light filtered through frosted windows, revealing the storm had passed, leaving a pristine white world outside. You've been asleep for 14 hours, the voice startled me upright. He sat in a chair across the room, one leg stretched out before him, his posture casual, but something in his stillness reminding me of a predator at rest. In daylight, he looked both more human and somehow less, his features too perfect, too sharply carved to be entirely natural. He'd dressed since our first encounter, a black thermal shirt clinging to his broad chest, though he remained barefoot despite the winter chill. That silver streak in his dark hair caught the morning light like polished metal. 14 hours. My voice emerged as a dry rasp. Your body needed it. Hypothermia, exhaustion, mild shock. He tilted his head, studying me. Hunger too, I imagine. As if on cue, my stomach growled audibly. I clutched it, embarrassed, which only seemed to amuse him. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, not quite a smile, but close. There's food, he said, rising with fluid grace that belied his injured side. Eggs, bacon. Coffee's already brewing. I should have been afraid. Should have been demanding answers, planning my escape, protecting the secrets in my backpack. My gaze darted around the room, panic rising, until I spotted it on a nearby chair, apparently untouched. I didn't look inside, he said, reading my thoughts with unsettling accuracy. Whatever you stole from Cerulean is still yours. I stiffened. How do you know about eat first? He cut me off, moving toward the kitchen. Questions after. I wanted to argue, but my body's needs overrode my suspicion. Cautiously, I disentangled myself from the blanket, relieved to discover I was still fully clothed except for my boots and coat, which had been carefully arranged near the fire to dry. My socks were new, though thick wool that hadn't been mine. The realization that he'd removed my wet clothes while I was unconscious sent heat rushing to my cheeks, moving stiffly. I made my way to the kitchen, where he was already sliding eggs onto plates with practiced efficiency. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal after the strangeness of our meeting. You never told me your name, I said, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the space. He glanced up, those amber eyes catching mine like they had in the forest direct. Intense, searching. Callum, he said finally. Callum Thorne. Thorne. I repeated. Like a thorn in the paw. Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps. Most people make rose references. I'm not most people. No, he agreed, his gaze lingering on me a moment too long. You're not. He gestured to a stool at the kitchen island, and I sat, accepting the steaming mug of coffee he offered. The first sip was heaven, rich and strong, exactly what my body craved. The food came next, and despite my wariness, I found myself devouring it with embarrassing speed. Callum ate more carefully, watching me over the rim of his own mug. The silence stretched between us, not entirely uncomfortable but charged with honest questions. Finally, I set down my fork. You said you've been looking for me. Why? He considered me for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Because of what Nathan found. The sound of my fiance's name on his lips sent ice through my veins. You knew Nathan? No, Callum's expression darkened. But I knew what he discovered at Cerulean. What got him killed? My throat tightened. The experimental drug. It's not a drug. His voice took on a harder edge. It's something much older. Something they're extracting from beings like me. Like him. A creature that shifted between man and wolf. The implications made my head swim. That's not possible, I whispered, though I'd seen the impossible with my own eyes. Werewolves aren't real? His smile was grim. And yet, here I am. Though we prefer shifters to werewolves, less Hollywood drama attached to it, I took another sip of coffee, trying to ground myself in the mundane action while my world tilted on its axis. If what you're saying is true, I said carefully, then Cerulean is. What? Hunting your kind? Experimenting on you? Harvesting, Callum corrected, the word sharp with disgust. They discovered certain compounds in shifter blood can enhance human abilities. Strength, healing, sensory perception. They're refining it, weaponizing it, creating soldiers who can access some of our abilities without the inconvenience of actually shifting. My mind flashed to the documents I'd stolen, lists of test subjects, chemical formulas, reports of enhanced healing rates and amplified sensory capacity. Reports of catastrophic failures, too. Bodies that rejected the compounds, nervous systems that overloaded, subjects who descended into feral madness. The side effects, I murmured. That's what Nathan found. The test subjects were dying. Callum nodded grimly. Or worse than dying. Your fianc had a conscience. When he realized what was happening, he started gathering evidence, planned to expose them, and they killed him for it. My voice broke on the last word, made it look like a hit and run, Callum confirmed. Standard Cerulean cleanup. Grief and rage churned together in my chest, a familiar storm I'd been weathering for 3 months. But now it had a specific target. How do you know all this? I demanded, suspicion flaring anew. How did you find me? A shadow passed over his face. He rose abruptly, lifting his shirt to reveal the bandage wound on his side and something else. Scars, dozens of them, crisscrossing his torso in deliberate patterns. Not injuries from battles or accidents. These were methodical, clinical. Because I was one of their subjects, he said, voice flat. For 2 years, they kept me caged, drew my blood, tested my limits, tried to unlock the genetic key to what makes a shifter different from a human. Horror crawled up my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't look away from the map of suffering etched into his skin. I escaped during a transfer 6 months ago, he continued, lowering his shirt. Been hunting them ever since. Trying to find others like me who've been taken. Trying to stop whatever they're planning. And that led you to me, I said slowly. Because of what I took from Nathan's office, Callum nodded once. Those files might contain what I need: locations of other facilities, names of test subjects, details of their research. I processed this, turning the information over like a strange gem, examining facets that caught the light differently with each rotation. You saved me in the forest, I said after a moment. Why not just let me freeze and take the files? Something complicated moved across his features. He turned away, moving to the window to stare out at the snow-covered landscape. I meant to, he admitted, his back to me. I tracked you for weeks, planned to intercept you on your way to the cabin, take what I needed. But when I found you in that storm, when I saw you, he trailed off, shoulders tense beneath the black fabric. When you saw me, what? I pressed. He turned back slowly, his amber eyes holding something I couldn't decipher. I caught your scent, and something responded, something primal. It wasn't a conscious choice to help you. My wolf simply wouldn't leave you there to die. The intensity of his gaze sent heat crawling up my neck. There was more he wasn't saying. I could feel it hanging in the air between us, heavy with implication. Is that normal? I asked. For your kind? A muscle in his jaw flexed. No, the single syllable contained multitudes. Questions bubbled up inside me, but before I could voice them, Callum tensed, his head turning sharply toward the window. His nostrils flared slightly, his entire demeanor shifting from man to predator in an instant. Someone's coming, he said, voice dropping to a growl. Pack what's important. We need to go, now. My heart lurched. Cerulean? No, his eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw genuine fear flash across his face. Something worse. He moved with startling speed, grabbing a duffel bag from beside the door and shoving essential items inside. I rushed to the sofa, collecting my backpack with trembling hands. What could possibly be worse than the people trying to kill us? I demanded. Callum paused, head lifting as if scenting the air again. When he looked at me, his pupils had elongated, more wolf than human. Remember when I said I escaped from Cerulean? His voice had deepened, roughened around the edges. I didn't escape alone. And not everyone who got out still has their humanity intact. A howl echoed in the distance, nothing like the mournful sound of a natural wolf. This was fractured, wrong, splitting the morning silence like broken glass. Callum's expression hardened. They followed my trail here, followed the scent of my blood. Who did? The failed experiments, he said grimly, tossing me a heavy coat I didn't recognize. The ones whose minds broke under Cerulean's testing. We call them the feral. Another howl answered the first, closer now. Then another. The sound raised every hair on my body, triggering fear more primal than anything I'd felt in the blizzard. Callum moved to my side, his heat engulfing me as he gripped my shoulders, forcing me to meet his gaze. Listen carefully. Elise, these creatures aren't wolves or men, there's something caught between. They hunt by scent and sound. They're faster than humans, stronger than natural wolves, and they don't feel pain the way we do. If they catch us, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The fear in his eyes told me everything. What do we do? I whispered. We run, he said simply. And we pray they don't catch our trail. As if to emphasize his words, a chorus of howls rose around the cabin close to close. The sound of creatures that had once been people, now reduced to hunger and rage and instinct. Callum's hand found mine, his skin burning hot against my fingers. The touch sent an electric current up my arm, startling in its intensity. Stay close to me, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. No matter what happens, no matter what you see, do not let go of my hand. As he pulled me toward the back door, I realized with perfect clarity that I had unwittingly stepped into a war I didn't understand, between creatures I hadn't known existed until yesterday, and the only ally I had was a man who could turn into a wolf, a man who admitted he'd initially planned to use me for what I knew, a man whose touch somehow felt more familiar than it had any right to be. We burst through the back door into a world of blinding white. The storm had left behind 3 feet of pristine snow and a silence that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. But beauty was the last thing on my mind as Callum pulled me across the covered back porch and down the steps, our boots crunching through the crystalline surface. The trees, he said, voice tight with urgency. We need cover. The dense pine forest began 30 yards from the cabin, a wall of deep green against the white landscape. We had barely made it halfway there when the first howl shattered the morning stillness. Much closer now, coming from the side of the cabin. We'd just fled. They had arrived. Don't look back, Callum ordered, his grip on my hand tightening. Just run. We crashed into the tree line, pine needles showering us with miniature avalanches as we brushed past. The forest floor had less snow, making movement easier, but branches clawed at my borrowed coat, slapping against my face as we wove between trunks at a punishing pace. Behind us, something snarled, a wet, guttural sound that was neither human nor animal. My heart jackknifed against my ribs. Despite Callum's warning, I couldn't stop myself from glancing back. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. 3 creatures lopped between the trees, moving with jerking, unnatural gaits. They resembled wolves in the broadest sense, but their proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, spines twisted, fur growing in patchy clumps that revealed mottled skin beneath. Their faces were the worst, caught halfway between wolf and human. with elongated jaws full of jagged teeth and eyes that held the tormented intelligence of creatures that remembered being human. Don't stop. Callum yanked me forward as I stumbled, nearly falling. They've caught our scent. We plunged deeper into the forest, the terrain sloping downward. My lungs burned, each breath a knife in my chest. Though I'd spent months running from cerulean, I'd never run like this for my life. With monsters at my heels, the terrain grew steeper. Ahead, I glimpsed a ravine cutting through the forest, a frozen creek at its bottom. Callum headed straight for it, pulling me along with grim determination. We'll never make it across. I gasped, seeing the 15-foot gap. We're not going across. He changed direction, leading me along the edge. There's a place. A howl cut him off, different from the others, coming from ahead rather than behind. Callum cursed, skidding to a halt so abruptly I collided with his back. They're circling us, he growled, eyes darting between the trees. Hurting us. What do we do? My voice shook, terror making it thin. Callum's expression hardened with decision. He seized my shoulders, amber eyes burning into mine. Do you trust me? He demanded. The question was absurd. I'd known him less than a day. He was a creature from myths, admitted to initially tracking me for his own purposes. And yet he'd saved me in the storm, tended my injuries, shared his food and shelter. I have to, I whispered. A flash of something like pain crossed his features. Not good enough. Yes or no, Elise? Do you trust me? Behind us, branches snapped as the ferals closed in. I could hear their labored breathing, smell the rank odor of their corrupted bodies. Yes, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Without another word, Callum spun me around so my back pressed against his chest, his arms encircling me from behind. Before I could question what he was doing, he backed us both to the very edge of the ravine. Hold tight to my arms, he instructed, his breath hot against my ear. And whatever happens, don't scream. The first of the ferals burst into view ahead of us, a nightmare of matted fur and exposed muscle, saliva dripping from misshapen jaws. It snarled when it saw us, dropping into a crouch to spring. Now, Callum shouted, and stepped backwards off the edge, taking me with him. We fell. The world tilted crazily, my stomach lurching into my throat as gravity claimed us. I bit back the scream that tried to tear free, clinging desperately to Callum's forearms as they tightened around me. For one endless moment, we were suspended in freefall, the winter air rushing past, then impact not against the frozen creek below, but against something solid halfway down the ravine wall. A ledge, hidden from above by an outcropping of rock. The breath slammed from my lungs as Callum took the brunt of our landing. Twisting to absorb the shock with his own body, we rolled, snow cushioning us, coming to rest with me sprawled across his chest, his arms still locked around me. Above us, furious howls echoed as the ferals reached the ravine edge, pacing in frustrated rage at losing their prey. Are you hurt? Callum's voice rumbled beneath my cheek, concern threading through the words. I took inventory, bruised, winded, heart racing but intact. Know you? I heal quickly. His hand moved to my hair, brushing away snow with surprising gentleness. But we need to move. This ledge leads to a cave system. They'll find a way down eventually. Reluctantly, I pushed myself off his chest, immediately missing his warmth. The ledge was wider than it had appeared during our fall, about 6 feet across, running along the ravine wall before disappearing around a bend. Callum rose fluidly despite his recent injuries, reaching down to help me up. How did you know this was here? I asked, as he led me along the narrow path, one hand on my elbow to steady me. I've been living in these mountains for months, he replied, learning every escape route, every hiding place. Necessary survival when you're being hunted. The path curved, revealing a dark opening in the ravine wall, a cave entrance partially hidden by hanging icicles. Callum ducked inside, pulling me after him. The temperature dropped immediately as sunlight faded behind us, replaced by a blue-tinted dimness that took my eyes several moments to adjust to. The cave extended deep into the mountain, but Callum stopped once we were safely beyond the entrance, sinking down against the wall with a barely suppressed groan. Only then did I notice the dark stain spreading across his side. You're bleeding. I knelt beside him, reaching for the hem of his shirt. Your wound reopened. He didn't stop me as I lifted the fabric, revealing the bandage now soaked through with fresh blood. The bullet wound had torn open during our escape, or more likely, when he'd cushioned our fall with his own body. It's nothing, he said, but the tightness around his eyes belied the claim. Silver takes longer to heal. That's all. Silver? I frowned, remembering old legends. That part of the myth is true. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Some myths have roots in truth. I dug through my backpack, relieved to find the small first aid kit I always carried. It wasn't much, but it contained gauze and antiseptic. Let me, I insisted, when he tried to take the supplies. You saved my life. Twice now. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, leaning back against the cave wall and allowing me to peel away the old bandage. The wound beneath was ugly, a deep furrow carved through muscle, the edges tinged with an unnatural grayish color where the silver had burned the tissue. Who shot you? I asked softly, working to clean the injury as gently as possible. Callum's jaw tightened. Hunters. Not cerulean, they want specimens alive. These were traditionalists. People who've known about shifters for generations and believe we're abominations to be exterminated. The matter-of-fact way he described people wanting him dead sent a chill through me. How can you live like this? Always hunted? Always running? You've been doing the same for 3 months, he pointed out, his amber eyes searching my face. How have you managed? The question caught me off guard. No one had asked how I was coping since Nathan's death, since my life imploded. I'd been too busy surviving to even ask myself. One day at a time, I said, finally, securing a fresh bandage over his wound. Keeping focused on what matters, exposing the truth about what happened to Nathan. Making sure he didn't die for nothing. Something softened in Callum's expression. You loved him very much. I did. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. He was brilliant, compassionate. He became a medical researcher to help people. When he realized what cerulean was really doing, he couldn't look the other way. Callum finished for me. That kind of integrity is rare. Tears stung my eyes, surprising me. I'd cried so much in the first weeks after Nathan's death that I thought I'd run dry. Apparently not. He deserved better. I whispered. Callum's hand rose hesitantly, then settled warm and solid on my shoulder. So do you? The simple statement broke something loose inside me, a dam I'd built to contain my grief, my fear, my rage at the injustice of it all. A sob tore from my throat before I could stop it, then another. Without a word, Callum pulled me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head as I finally allowed myself to fall apart. I don't know how long I cried, face pressed against his shirt, his steady heartbeat beneath my cheek. When the storm finally passed, leaving me hollow and strangely peaceful, he didn't immediately let go. His fingers threaded gently through my hair, the rhythmic motion soothing. I'm sorry, I mumbled, embarrassed by my breakdown. Don't be. His voice rumbled through his chest. You've been strong for too long. I pulled back reluctantly, wiping at my face. So have you. From the sound of it, something vulnerable flashed in his eyes before he glanced away. It's different for me. How? He was silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a near whisper. Because I wasn't always alone. I had a pack once. Family. His hand unconsciously moved to a leather cord around his neck. I hadn't noticed before, a simple pendant carved from dark wood. Cerulean found us 3 years ago. I was the only one they took alive. The implication stole my breath. They killed your family? My brother died trying to protect me. My sister. His voice cracked. I never found her body. I hope that means she escaped, but I've found no trace of her since. Understanding bloomed painfully in my chest. That's why you're hunting cerulean. Not just for revenge, but to find any survivors, he confirmed. And to destroy what they're creating with our blood before they perfect it. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, my fingers twining with his. The contact sent that same electric spark up my arm, stronger now. Callum's eyes widened slightly, his gaze dropping to our joined hands. You feel it too, he said, not a question but a realization. What is it? I whispered. His thumb traced small circles on my wrist, sending shivers across my skin. I don't know, he admitted, but it's getting stronger. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't name. He was too close, his scent pine and smoke and something wild filling my senses. I should pull away. This connection, whatever it was, complicated an already impossible situation. And yet I found myself leaning closer, drawn by something deeper than conscious thought. Callum's free hand rose to my face, fingers ghosting along my cheekbone with a tenderness that made my heart stutter. Elise, he murmured, my name sounding like both warning and prayer on his lips. A distant howl shattered the moment, echoing through the cave system. Callum stiffened, his head turning sharply toward the entrance. "They've found a way down," he said, all softness vanishing from his expression as he rose to his feet, pulling me up with him. "We need to go deeper." As he led me further into the darkness, I tried to ignore the lingering warmth of his touch, the strange emptiness I felt when his hand released mine. Whatever was happening between us was dangerous, more dangerous, perhaps, than the creatures hunting us through the snow, because while I could run from the ferals, I was beginning to suspect there would be no escaping the pull I felt toward Callum Thorne. A Werewolf Romance Audiobook Section 5. Below the surface, the deeper we ventured into the cave system, the more it felt like descending into another world. Our path narrowed, widened, twisted, a labyrinth of stone carved by ancient waters. Callum moved with confidence through the darkness, one hand always reaching back to guide me over treacherous terrain. My fingers remained locked in his, that strange current still pulsing between us like a second heartbeat. I'd long lost track of time when the passage finally widened into a chamber large enough that our flashlight, the only one from Callum's pack, couldn't illuminate the ceiling. The beam caught glimmers of crystal embedded in the walls, reflecting tiny rainbows across the otherwise oppressive darkness. "We can rest here," Callum said, voice hushed in deference to the cathedral-like space. "The ferals won't follow this far underground. The darkness confuses them, and there are too many intersecting scents." He set his pack down and extracted a small camp lantern, its warm glow a welcome change from the harsh white beam of the flashlight. The light revealed a surprisingly hospitable space, a flat, sandy area beside a small underground pool. The water so clear it appeared black in the low light. "You've been here before," I observed, noting the small cache of supplies tucked into a natural shelf in the rock wall, a sealed container of food, extra batteries, a folded thermal blanket, one of my emergency shelters. Callum knelt by the pool, dipping his hand to test the water. "I have several throughout these mountains, places Cerulean doesn't know about." I sank down onto a relatively smooth boulder, my muscles aching from the frantic escape and subsequent trek through the caves. The reality of our situation pressed in around me, hunted by monstrous creatures, hiding in a cave with a man who could transform into a wolf, tangled in conspiracies I barely understood. Just days ago, my biggest worry had been finding Uncle Jack's cabin before the winter weather made mountain travel impossible. "The ferals," I said after a moment. "You said they were failed experiments. What exactly did Cerulean do to them?" Callum's expression darkened. He sat across from me, the lantern between us casting his face in dramatic shadows that emphasized his otherworldly features. "Cerulean started with a simple goal: extract the compounds from shifter blood that give us our abilities. But they wanted more than just healing or strength. They wanted the full transformation." His jaw tightened. "Some of their scientists believe they could isolate the genetic sequence that allows us to shift and transfer it to human subjects." Horror crept up my spine. "They tried to turn humans into shifters?" "Tried and failed. Catastrophically." He rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "The human body rejects the transformation without generations of genetic adaptation." The subjects' bodies began to shift, but couldn't complete the process. Couldn't shift back either. Trapped between forms as their minds shattered from the pain, I remembered the twisted creatures that had pursued us, the two long limbs, the faces caught between human and wolf, the eyes that still held human awareness beneath animal rage. "That's monstrous," I whispered. "That's Cerulean." His voice was flat. "And they're still trying. Still convinced they can perfect the process if they just find the right genetic key." His gaze lifted to mine, intense in the lantern light. "That's what Nathan found evidence of their human trials. Evidence that they'd moved from willing test subjects to unwilling ones." My blood ran cold. Unwilling? Homeless people. Unregistered immigrants. People who wouldn't be missed. Each word fell like a stone. "And children." "Children?" The word emerged strangled. Callum nodded grimly. "Orphans, mostly. Children with no family to ask questions. Their bodies adapt better to the transformation. But the psychological damage." He couldn't continue. Nausea rolled through me as pieces clicked into place, sections of Nathan's files I hadn't been able to decipher. References to juvenile subjects and adaptive capacity. I'd assumed they referred to animal testing. That's why they killed him, I realized. Not just to protect their research, but to hide that they're experimenting on children, and why they won't stop hunting you until they recover what you took. Callum's gaze dropped to my backpack, which I'd kept close despite our desperate flight. Nathan's evidence could destroy them, not just the company, but everyone involved. Prison sentences measured in lifetimes. I hugged the backpack closer. Then we need to get it out. Release it publicly. It's not that simple. He rose restlessly, pacing the perimeter of our small camp. Cerulean has powerful backers, government contracts, military connections. They'd bury the evidence before it ever reached the public. Then what do we do? He stopped, turning to face me directly. We hit them where it hurts. Their main research facility, the place where they kept me, where they're creating the ferals. We destroy their research, free any captives, and gather enough physical evidence that they can't cover it up. The magnitude of what he was suggesting left me speechless. Breaking into a heavily guarded research facility? Taking on an organization with virtually unlimited resources? That's suicide. I finally managed. Probably. His smile held no humor. But I was dead the moment they took me. Everything since has been borrowed time. Something in his tone, the flat acceptance of his own mortality, sparked an unexpected anger in me. And what about me? I demanded, rising to face him. Are you planning to sacrifice my borrowed time too? His expression softened. I would never ask you to come with me, Elise. Once we're clear of immediate danger, I'll get you to safety. Somewhere Cerulean can't find you. And then you'll walk into their facility alone. Die for nothing? The words burst from me with surprising heat. Nathan died trying to expose them, and it accomplished nothing. I won't watch someone else. I stopped abruptly, the words catching in my throat. Callum went very still, his amber eyes searching mine. Someone else? You what? I didn't know how to answer. What was Callum to me? A stranger I'd met yesterday. A supernatural being I barely understood. A man whose touch sent electricity through my veins, whose pain resonated with my own in ways that defied explanation. Someone I care about, I finished lamely. Knowing it didn't begin to encompass the confusing tangle of emotions he stirred in me, he closed the distance between us slowly, as if giving me time to retreat. I stood my ground, heart hammering against my ribs. You shouldn't care about me. His voice had dropped to a rough whisper. I'm not safe, Elise. Nothing in my life is safe anymore, I replied. That's not a reason to stop caring. His hand rose to my face, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with aching gentleness. That electric current flowed stronger between us, not just where he touched my skin, but somehow deeper. As if something within me recognized something within him. There's something happening between us, he murmured. Something I don't understand. You feel it too? The words emerged barely audible. From the first moment I caught your scent in the forest. His thumb brushed my lower lip, sending shivers cascading through me. It's like a tether pulling me toward you, getting stronger every hour we spend together. My breath caught. I should have been frightened by the intensity in his eyes, by the admission of something supernatural binding us together. Instead, I felt a bewildering sense of rightness. Is it normal? I asked, echoing my earlier question. For your kind? This close, I could see his pupils dilating, the amber of his irises darkening to burnished gold. There are stories, he said carefully. Ancient ones, about rare bonds formed between shifters and certain humans. Soul bonds, some called them, but they're legends, not something I ever expected to encounter. And now, his gaze dropped to my lips. Now I'm not sure what to believe, the air between us charged with possibility. His face lowered toward mine, his intent unmistakable. Despite every rational voice screaming that this was insanity, that I barely knew this man, that we were in danger, that my life had shattered too recently to risk my heart again, I found myself rising onto my toes, closing the final distance. His lips brushed mine, feather light at first, a question rather than a demand. The contact sent a shock wave through me, that strange connection flaring white hot. I gasped, and he took the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his arm sliding around my waist to pull me flush against him. Heat bloomed everywhere our bodies touched. His kiss was nothing like I'd imagined, not the savage claiming of a predator, but something almost reverent, as if I were precious beyond measure. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the thunderous beat of his heart matching the frantic rhythm of my own. For one perfect moment, the world beyond ceased to exist. No cerulean, no ferals, no danger. Just this man and the inexplicable pull between us, like planets locked in orbit. Then Callum jerked back suddenly, his body going rigid. His head whipped toward the tunnel we'd entered through, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. What is it? I whispered, still dazed from the kiss. We need to go. He was already gathering our supplies, movements swift and economical. Now, the ferals? Fear replaced the warm languor that had settled in my limbs. No, his expression had hardened. All tenderness vanished. Something else. Something worse. What could be worse than the ferals? I demanded, shouldering my backpack with trembling hands. Callum's eyes met mine, burning with a mixture of rage and fear I hadn't seen before. Cerulean found us, and they've brought their pet hunters. The ones who shot me. My blood ran cold. How? We covered our tracks. Someone's tracking you, he said grimly, extinguishing the lantern and plunging us into darkness broken only by the flashlight beam. Something on you. Something you've been carrying. Realization hit like a physical blow. The files. They must have planted a tracker in Nathan's documents. Callum cursed under his breath. We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to get deeper. There's another way out of these caves, but it's not an easy path. He took my hand again, the gesture now familiar despite our brief acquaintance. As he led me toward a narrow crevice, barely visible in the rock wall, I couldn't help but think about what he'd said, a tether pulling us together, growing stronger with time. If such a bond truly existed, I wondered with growing dread what would happen if it broke. If Cerulean's hunters caught up to us. If that bullet wound reopened at a crucial moment. If the kiss we'd just shared proved to be our first and last. As we squeezed into the crevice, the distant echo of boots on stone reaching our ears, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not lose anyone else to Cerulean. Not the mysterious sister Callum still hoped to find, and certainly not the wolf man, whose kiss had awakened something inside me I hadn't known was sleeping. The crevice opened into a nightmare. What had begun as a tight squeeze between rock walls soon became a vertical chimney, forcing us to brace against opposing sides and shimmy downward into absolute darkness. The flashlight, now secured to Callum's wrist with a strap, cast disorienting shadows as we descended. The sound of pursuit boots on stone, men's voices grew fainter above us, but offered little comfort. How much further? I gasped, my shoulders burning with the effort of controlled descent, palms scraped raw against rough stone. Almost there, Callum answered from below, his voice tight with concentration. There's a ledge coming up. Step where I step. I followed his lead blindly, trusting him with my life for what felt like the 100th time in days. The chimney suddenly widened, and I felt his hands at my waist, guiding me onto solid ground. Relief flooded my aching muscles as my feet found purchase. We stood in a low-ceiling passage, the air noticeably cooler and damper than the chamber we'd fled. The distant sound of running water echoed from somewhere ahead. Underground river, Callum explained, noting my expression. It's our way out, but also our biggest danger. The winter melt makes it unpredictable. Sometimes these passages flood without warning. Wonderful, I muttered. Drowning or cerulean. Excellent choices. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone in an instant. Come on. We need to keep moving. As we made our way through the increasingly narrow tunnel, the roar of water grew louder. The passage floor became slick beneath our boots, making progress treacherous. Callum kept one hand firmly clasped around mine, the other holding the flashlight ahead to illuminate our path. My mind kept returning to our interrupted kiss, to the electric current that seemed to flow between us whenever we touched. Soul bond, he'd called it. The term should have sounded ridiculous, something from fantasy novels, not real life. Yet after everything I'd witnessed in the past 48 hours, who was I to say what was impossible? Callum, I ventured, as we paused at a fork in the tunnel, this bond you mentioned. What exactly does it mean for us? He stilled, the flashlight beam dropping to illuminate the ground between us rather than meeting my eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Legends vary. Some say the bond forms to protect something vital to shifter survival. Others call it fate, souls recognizing each other across lifetimes. His jaw tightened. All agree it's unbreakable once formed. A lifetime connection, whether wanted or not. The implications sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cave's chill. And you think that's what's happening to us? A lifetime connection? His amber eyes finally rose to mine, their expression unreadable in the harsh shadows cast by the flashlight. I don't know what to think. I've lived among shifters my entire life and never witnessed such a bond. For it to form with a human, he broke off, shaking his head. It shouldn't be possible. But you feel it. I pressed. This pull between us, yes. The admission seemed torn from him. And it terrifies me. Before I could respond, he tensed, head lifting like a predator catching a scent. They've found the chimney. We need to move faster. He chose the right-hand passage, leading us deeper into the labyrinth. The tunnel ceiling dropped lower, forcing us to crouch, then crawl through a section barely wide enough for Callum's broad shoulders. Just when I was beginning to fear we'd taken a dead end, the passage opened abruptly into a vast chamber. The flashlight beam couldn't reach the distant walls or ceiling, but it caught the surface of what lay before us, a black, mirror-smooth underground lake, its far shore invisible in the darkness. The roar we'd been hearing came from a waterfall cascading down the far wall, feeding the subterranean pool. The river empties into this chamber, Callum explained, voice hushed by the immensity of the space, and continues out through a passage underwater. That's our exit. I stared at the obsidian surface with mounting dread. You expect us to swim? Through an underwater tunnel? It's not long, 30 seconds underwater at most before it opens into a larger passage we can walk through. It eventually leads to an exit several miles from the cabin. In winter, I reminded him, we'll freeze once we're out. I have supplies cached at the exit point. Dry clothes, emergency gear. He turned to face me fully. It's our only option, Elise. They're getting closer. As if to emphasize his point, a distant shout echoed through the passage we just traversed, human voices, barking orders. The hunt was closing in. I nodded grimly. Let's do it. We approached the lake's edge, where Callum quickly secured our backpacks and waterproof sacks from his supply pack. I watched his efficient movements, a question nagging at me. Why didn't Cerulean just kill me like they did Nathan? I asked suddenly. Why hunt me for 3 months instead of eliminating me immediately? Callum's hands stilled momentarily. I was wondering when you'd ask that. He secured the last pack, then straightened to face me. They need you alive. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. Why? Something complicated moved across his features, reluctance, concern, resignation. Because of what you are. What I am. I repeated, confused. I'm a high school art teacher from Minneapolis. There's nothing special about me. That's not entirely true. His voice dropped lower. What do you know about your birth parents, Elise? The question blindsided me. How do you know I'm adopted? Answer the question. His intensity unnerved me. Nothing, I admitted. Closed adoption. My adoptive parents only knew that my birth mother was very young, possibly a teenager. She left me at a hospital in northern Minnesota with no identification. Callum nodded as if confirming something he already suspected. The timing fits. Winter of 1993, a massive storm. A young woman appearing at a rural hospital in labor, refusing to give her name. My heart began to pound. How could you possibly know that? Because the stories spread through shifter communities. His eyes held mine, steady and serious. A female shifter, heavily pregnant, fleeing hunters. She'd been separated from her pack during an attack. She knew she wouldn't survive, but she was determined her child would. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother was one of us, Elise. His voice gentled, perhaps seeing the shock on my face. You're half shifter. That's not possible, I whispered, though even as I denied it, pieces began clicking into place. My unusually acute sense of smell. My comfort in forests other people found intimidating. My inexplicable recognition of Callum in wolf form. I can't shift. I've never shown any signs. The ability to shift is only one aspect of shifter heritage, he explained. It requires specific genetic markers that don't always pass to mixed blood offspring. But other traits do: enhanced senses, accelerated healing, extended lifespan. And most importantly, he hesitated. What? I demanded. Blood compatibility, he finished. Cerulean has been trying to create successful human shifter hybrids for years. Their test subjects keep dying because human bodies reject shifter DNA. But you, a natural-born hybrid, your blood could be the key they've been seeking. The missing link for their experiments. Horror crawled up my throat as understanding dawned. They don't want the files. They want me, both, Callum corrected grimly. The files for evidence of what Nathan discovered. You for your blood. How would they even know about me? My mind raced, trying to process this impossible revelation. I didn't know myself. Nathan's research, he said softly. Did he ever take blood samples from you? For comparison, perhaps? To establish baselines for his work? The memory struck like lightning. Nathan excited about a new testing protocol, asking if he could use my blood as a normal human control sample. I'd thought nothing of it at the time, just supporting my fianki's work. He found something in my blood, I realized, my voice hollow. Something unusual. And he must have documented it. Enough for Cerulean to suspect what you are. Callum's expression darkened. When they killed him and realized you'd taken his files, you became their most valuable target, both for what you knew and what you are. The enormity of it all threatened to overwhelm me. My entire identity, my understanding of myself, crumbling beneath this new reality. I wasn't fully human. My birth mother hadn't abandoned me. She'd sacrificed herself to save me from hunters. And now, 30 years later, those same hunters had found me anyway. I might have collapsed under the weight of it if not for the sudden commotion echoing from the passage behind us. Voices, much closer now. Flashlight beams danced at the tunnel entrance. Time's up, Callum said urgently, grabbing my hand. We need to go, now. We waded into the lake, the icy water stealing my breath despite the wetsuit like thermal layers Callum had insisted I wear beneath my clothing. The cold was immediate and brutal, shocking my system and momentarily distracting me from the existential crisis of my newly discovered heritage. Stay close to me, Callum instructed as the water reached our chests. Take a deep breath when I do. The passage is straight ahead, about 15 feet underwater. Follow the pull of the current. The shouts behind us grew louder. A beam of light swept across the chamber, catching us in its glare. There they are. A man's voice bellowed. In the water. Elise, dive. Callum ordered. I sucked in a deep breath and plunged beneath the surface just as the crack of gunfire echoed through the chamber. The water muffled the sound, but I felt the concussion ripple through the lake. Callum's hand gripped mine with bruising force as he pulled me deeper, kicking powerfully toward a dark opening in the rock wall. The underwater passage loomed before us, a black maw that promised either escape or death. I fought the instinctive panic as we swam into the constricted space, the rock closing around us, my lungs already burning for air. Callum's hand remained locked with mine, his supernatural strength pulling us forward through the current. 10 seconds. 15. The passage showed no sign of ending. My chest felt ready to explode, spots dancing behind my eyes. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath a moment longer, the tunnel curved upward. We burst through the surface together, gasping for air. The relief of oxygen flooding my lungs was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. We'd emerged into a narrow canal, the current gentle enough to let us wade through waist-deep water. Are you okay? Callum asked, his voice echoing in the confined space. Before I could answer, a muffled boom reached us from the chamber we'd fled, followed by an ominous rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very rock around us. What was that? I asked, alarmed. Callum's expression hardened. They're blasting, trying to collapse the underwater passage to trap us. Can they do that? These cave systems are unstable. One wrong explosion could bring down entire sections. He urged me forward. We need to reach the exit before a second explosion, louder than the first, cut him off. This time, the rumble didn't stop. The walls shook, small stones raining down around us. Run, Callum shouted, shoving me ahead of him down the passage. We splashed through the canal as the rumbling intensified behind us, the sound of collapsing rock growing closer. The passage began to slope upward, the water level dropping to our ankles, then disappearing entirely. My lungs burned with exertion, my wet clothes weighing me down as we raced through the increasingly narrow tunnel. Light appeared ahead, faint daylight filtering through what had to be the exit. Hope surged through me as we sprinted toward it. We were 20 feet from freedom when the ceiling gave way. Callum's enhanced reflexes saved us both. He shoved me forward with supernatural strength just as tons of rock crashed down. I tumbled through the exit into blinding daylight and snow, rolling down a short slope before coming to a stop. When I looked back, my heart stopped. The cave entrance was gone, replaced by a pile of fallen rock. And Callum was nowhere to be seen. No, I screamed, scrambling back up the slope toward the collapse. Callum. No answer came. I began clawing at the rocks with bare hands, ignoring the pain as sharp edges sliced my skin. Callum, can you hear me? Nothing but silence answered my desperate calls. Tears streamed down my face as I continued digging frantically, moving stones with no clear plan, driven by pure panic. Please, I sobbed, my fingers bleeding and numb from cold. Please be alive. As I shifted a larger boulder, something impossible happened. The cuts on my hands deep, ragged tears in the skin began to close before my eyes. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. New pink skin knit together over wounds that should have taken days to heal. I stared in shock, Callum's words echoing in my mind. Enhanced senses. Accelerated healing. You're half-shifter. Before I could process what I was witnessing, a low groan emanated from beneath the pile of rock. Renewed hope surged through me. Callum, I'm here. Keep making noise so I can find you. Another groan, slightly to the left of where I'd been digging. I redirected my efforts, working with desperate intensity. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, I uncovered a hand, Callum's hand, reaching up through a small gap in the rubble. I grasped it, feeling that electric current flow between us stronger than ever. I've got you. I'm getting you out. The hand squeezed mine weakly. Taking that as encouragement, I redoubled my efforts, moving stones until I could see his face, bloodied but conscious. The rest of him still pinned beneath the collapse. Elise, he whispered, his voice rough with dust and pain. You need to go. The hunters, they'll be looking for another way around. I'm not leaving you, I declared fiercely, continuing to clear debris from his chest and shoulders. Not now. Not ever. His amber eyes locked with mine, something like wonder dawning through the pain. You're healing, he observed, gaze flicking to my hands, now whole, despite the abuse they'd endured. It's awakening in you. Tell me about it later, I grunted, leveraging a heavy stone off his torso. After I get you out of here. A ghost of a smile touched his bloodied lips. So stubborn. You have no idea, I promised him, my determination fueled by something beyond normal human reserve, something wild and fierce awakening in my blood. Something that recognized this man as mine to protect, as surely as if we'd known each other for years rather than days. As I worked to free him from nature's prison, I silently dared cerulean to find us. They thought they wanted my blood for their experiments. They had no idea what they'd awakened both in me and between us. For the first time since Nathan's death, I felt something beyond fear and grief. Something primal and powerful. I felt like a wolf finding her teeth. It took nearly an hour to free Callum from the collapsed cave entrance. By the time I pulled him clear, the winter sun was already sinking toward the mountains, casting long purple shadows across the snow. His injuries were extensive: ribs cracked, left leg badly bruised, a deep gash across his forehead that had only just stopped bleeding. Can you walk? I asked, supporting his weight as he struggled to his feet. He nodded grimly, though the pain that flashed across his features told a different story. We need to find the supply cache. It's not far under a fallen pine about 200 yards north. I helped him limp through the snow, his arm heavy across my shoulders, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts that couldn't quite hide his suffering. The bond between us seemed to pulse with each labored step, somehow transmitting echoes of his pain to my own body. I found myself wondering if this strange connection went both ways, if he could sense my fear, my determination, the confusion still swirling through me after his revelation about my heritage. Half-shifter. The words still felt foreign, impossible. Yet the evidence was literally in my blood. In the way my hands had healed before my eyes as I dug him from the rubble. We found the cache exactly where he'd said it would be, a hollow beneath a massive fallen pine, hidden by snow and deadfall. Inside was a waterproof duffel containing dry clothes, emergency rations, basic medical supplies, and most surprisingly, a satellite phone. You've been prepared, I observed, as he leaned against the tree trunk, eyes closed as he caught his breath. Survival depends on planning, he replied, voice tight with pain. We need to change into dry clothes before hypothermia sets in. I turned my back as he stripped off his sodden garments, hearing rather than seeing his muffled grunts of pain. When I finally turned around, he was dressed in dry thermal layers and pulling on a heavy winter coat. Despite the clothes, he looked pale, almost gray around the edges. Your turn, he said, averting his eyes to offer the same privacy he'd been given. I changed quickly, the dry clothes a blessed relief against my chilled skin. When I was finished, I found him examining the satellite phone with a frown. What's wrong? I asked. Battery's dead. He tucked the useless device away with a grimace. We can't call for help. Who would you call anyway? The question slipped out before I could stop it, tinged with the sudden realization of how little I knew about this man, this shifter who'd become my sole lifeline. Something flickered across his features: hesitation, perhaps. I have contacts. Other shifters who oppose cerulean. People who could help us. A resistance, I said, understanding dawning. You're not just running and hiding, you're fighting back. Trying to. He pushed himself upright, wincing as the movement jarred his injured side. We need to move. There's a hunting cabin about 3 miles from here. Not much, but it's shelter for the night. We set off through the deepening shadows of late afternoon, our progress painfully slow with Callum's injuries. Though he tried to hide it, I could tell each step was agony. When he stumbled for the third time in 20 minutes, I forced him to stop. Let me look at that wound again, I insisted. The silver one. He hesitated, then nodded, lowering himself carefully onto a fallen log. I knelt before him, lifting his thermal shirt to reveal the bandage I'd applied in the cave, now soaked through with fresh blood and something darker, almost black, seeping from the edges. It's getting worse, I said, alarm coloring my voice. The silver's poisoning you. I know. His amber eyes met mine, surprisingly calm. I can feel it spreading. We need to get it out. I rummaged through the medical kit, finding a pair of tweezers and antiseptic. There must be fragments still embedded in the wound. Callum caught my wrist as I reached toward him. It's too dangerous here, in the open. We need to reach shelter first. You might not make it to shelter at this rate, I argued. A weak smile touched his lips. Concerned for me, little fox? The endearment sent an unexpected warmth through me despite our dire situation. Of course I am. We're in this together now. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Yes, we are. We continued our trek through the gathering dusk, the forest growing darker and more ominous around us. When we finally spotted the cabin, little more than a one-room hunter's shelter with a stone chimney, it felt like finding salvation. Inside was basic but serviceable: a small wood stove, a rough-hewn table and chairs, a single bed frame with a thin mattress, and shelves stocked with canned goods and emergency supplies. Clearly someone maintained it for hunting season. Though it didn't appear to have been used recently, I helped Callum to the bed, then busied myself lighting the wood stove, grateful to find dry kindling and logs stacked nearby. As warmth began to fill the small space, I turned my attention back to his injury. Now, I said firmly, setting out the medical supplies on the bedside table. Let me see that wound. This time he didn't argue, simply lifted his shirt and lay back against the thin pillow. The bandage came away with a sickening squelch, revealing angry red flesh marbled with black tendrils spreading outward from the bullet track. Silver poisoning, he confirmed, seeing my expression. My body can't heal around it. I'll get it out, I promised, though I had no medical training beyond basic first aid. I sterilized the tweezers with a lighter from the emergency kit, then took a deep breath. This is going to hurt. I've endured worse, his jaw set in a hard line. Do what you have to do. For the next 20 minutes, I worked with painstaking care, extracting tiny silver fragments embedded deep in the wound. Each piece I removed seemed to cause him equal parts pain and relief, his body flinching away even as the black tendrils receded slightly. When I finally extracted what seemed to be the last fragment, a sliver no larger than a grain of rice, he exhaled heavily, as if he'd been holding his breath the entire time. Better? I asked, applying antiseptic to the now clean wound. Yes. His voice sounded stronger already. Thank you. As I bandaged his side with fresh gauze, a comfortable silence fell between us. The strange intimacy of caring for him, of literally pulling poison from his flesh, had shifted something in our dynamic. The wariness that had characterized our early interactions had given way to something deeper, more trusting. Your backpack, he said, suddenly, breaking the quiet. We need to find that tracker. I retrieved my backpack from where I'd set it by the door, bringing it to the bed. Together, we emptied its contents, examining each item carefully. Nothing obvious stood out, no electronic devices, no strange additions to my personal items. It has to be in the files, I said. Unwrapping the waterproof package containing Nathan's research, we spread the papers across the bed, scrutinizing each page. Finally, Callum's fingers stilled on a small translucent sticker affixed to the back of one of the lab reports, so thin and clear it was nearly invisible. There, he said, voice tight. Subcutaneous transmitter. Military grade. They've been tracking this the whole time, with careful precision. He peeled the tracker away, holding it up to the light. No larger than a fingernail. It looked harmless, innocent. Can they still follow it? I asked, eyeing the device with newfound hatred. Yes, but not for long. He stood, moving stiffly to the wood stove. Without ceremony, he dropped the tracker into the flames, where it sizzled briefly before melting into nothingness. That should buy us time. I began gathering the scattered papers, but as I did, a single photograph slipped from between the pages, one I hadn't noticed before. It showed a laboratory setup with examination tables, medical equipment, and on a whiteboard in the background, a familiar symbol, a stylized blue wave cerulean's logo, but it was what stood beside the whiteboard that froze my blood. A calendar clearly visible, with a date circled in red, and beneath the date, handwritten words, Phase 3 EM, integration, EM, my initials, Callum, I whispered, holding out the photo. Look, he took it, face hardening as he processed what he was seeing. When was this taken? I don't know. Nathan never showed me these photos. My hands trembled slightly. But they knew about me before he died. They were planning something involving me. The date is from 6 months ago, he said quietly. Before I escaped, a terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. You said you were held by cerulean for 2 years. That you escaped 6 months ago. Yes. And you've been tracking me for how long exactly? His silence was damning. Callum, I pressed, something cold settling in my stomach. How long have you known about me? He set the photo down carefully, as if buying time. When he finally met my eyes, his expression was guarded. I heard your name for the first time while I was still their prisoner. They spoke of you as their solution, the missing piece. A natural-born hybrid whose blood could stabilize the transformation process. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You knew who I was before you found me in the forest. Yes. And you didn't think that was important information to share? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. That cerulean had plans for me before Nathan even died. I was waiting for the right time, the right time? I cut him off, anger flaring. Like after I saved your life? After I trusted you? After I kissed you? He flinched at that, the reminder of our shared intimacy clearly striking home. I didn't know how to tell you. I wasn't even certain you were the same person until I caught your scent in the forest. My scent? I repeated incredulously. They had samples of your blood in the lab, he explained. I could smell it, different from human blood, different from shifter blood, unique. When I found you in the blizzard, I recognized that same scent immediately. The revelation landed like a blow. So all this time, while I've been thinking our meeting was chance, what? Fate? Some mystical soul bond? You've actually been hunting me, just like cerulean has. Not like them, he said sharply. Never like them. I wanted to protect you. By lying to me? I stood up, putting distance between us. By manipulating me? I never manipulated you. He rose too, his expression pained. Everything between us, the connection we feel, that's real, Elise. I didn't expect it, didn't plan for it, but you used it, I said quietly. Used me to get to Nathan's research. Initially, yes. The admission clearly cost him. I needed those files to find others like me who've been captured, to stop what cerulean is doing. But that changed the moment I found you in that storm. I wanted to believe him. The pull between us, that inexplicable bond, urged me to trust his words, to accept his explanation. But the betrayal cut too deep, the timing too convenient. I need some air, I said abruptly, grabbing my coat from where it hung by the door. Elise, wait, he moved to follow, grimacing as the sudden movement pulled at his injuries. It's not safe out there alone. I can't be in here with you right now. I yanked the door open, the blast of cold air a welcome shock against my heated skin. I need to think. Please, he said, and something in his voice, a raw vulnerability I hadn't heard before, made me pause. If you go out there, they might find you. I can't protect you if maybe I don't need your protection, I snapped, the newly discovered truth of my heritage lending steel to my spine. Maybe I never did. Before he could respond, I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me with more force than necessary. The night air hit my lungs like ice water, shocking but clarifying. Stars glittered overhead in a vast expanse of black, indifferent to the human or not quite human drama unfolding beneath them. I paced the small clearing before the cabin, my thoughts racing. Had everything been a lie? The connection I felt to Callum had seemed so real, so visceral, like something ancient awakening in my blood. Was that just wishful thinking? Desperation for connection after months of isolation and fear? A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the clearing. I froze, suddenly aware of my vulnerability. Had my impulsive exit just endangered us both? I turned back toward the cabin, ready to swallow my pride and return to safety. Before I could take a step, a voice spoke from the shadows, female, unfamiliar, with a hint of amusement. Well. The famous Elise Morgan, wandering alone in the woods, a figure emerged from between the trees, tall, lithe, with silver blonde hair that seemed to catch the moonlight. My brother certainly has a talent for complicating simple extractions. Your brother? I echoed, mind racing to catch up. The woman's smile revealed teeth too sharp to be fully human. Her eyes, when they caught the light from the cabin's window, glowed the same impossible amber as Callum's. Callum didn't mention me? She tilted her head, studying me with predatory interest. I'm Sylvia Thorne, the sister he thinks is dead. My blood ran cold as understanding dawned. The sister who escaped cerulean. Oh, I did more than escape. Her smile widened, revealing more of those too sharp teeth. I embraced what they made me, and now I've come to bring you in hybrid. One way or another, as if to emphasize her point, her form began to blur at the edges, bones shifting beneath her skin in the beginning stages of transformation. I backed toward the cabin door, heart hammering against my ribs. Callum, I shouted, fear overriding any lingering anger. Callum, help. The door burst open behind me. Callum appeared, his expression shifting from concern to shock as he registered the figure before us. Sylvia? His voice broke on the name, disbelief and horror mingling. You're alive? Hello, brother. Her voice had deepened, roughened around the edges as her transformation progressed. Did you miss me? The siblings locked eyes across the clearing, decades of shared history and months of separate trauma hanging in the balance between them. And me, caught in the middle, the prize they had both, in their own ways, been hunting all along. This is impossible, Callum whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I searched for you. For months. There was no trace because I didn't want to be found, Sylvia replied, her transformation pausing in that uncanny middle state, not fully human, not fully wolf. Her fingers had elongated into claws, her face subtly reshaped, teeth gleaming inhumanly sharp in the moonlight. Not by you anyway. Callum moved forward, placing himself between me and his sister. Despite his injuries, he stood tall, muscles coiled with tension. What happened to you, Sylv? What did they do? They freed me, she said simply. Showed me what I could become when I stopped fighting the change. When I embraced it instead. You're working for cerulean. It wasn't a question. The betrayal in his voice cut through the night air like a blade. With them, she corrected. There's a difference. They need what I can give them, control over the transformation. And I need what they can give me, power beyond anything our pathetic little pack ever imagined. I watched the siblings face each other. Mirror images distorted by time and trauma, both with that distinctive silver streak in their dark hair. Both with those amber eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. But where Callum's gaze held pain and concern, Sylvia's burned with something colder. Something broken. You've become one of the ferals, Callum said. Realization dawning in his voice, Sylvia laughed. The sound unnervingly musical despite her half-transformed state. Oh, no, brother. The ferals are failed experiments. Mindless beasts useful only as hunting dogs. I am something much more valuable, a successful integration. Mind intact, transformation controlled. The prototype for cerulean's new generation of operatives. Her gaze shifted to me, predatory assessment in those amber eyes. And she's the missing piece. Her blood, hybrid blood that naturally reconciles human and shifter DNA, is the stabilizing agent we need to perfect the process. Callum's hand found mine, squeezing with silent warning. I returned the pressure, momentarily setting aside my anger in the face of this new threat. Whatever lay between us, we were allies against the monster his sister had become. You're not taking her, Callum stated flatly. Don't be dramatic. Sylvia rolled her eyes. A jarringly human gesture from her inhuman face. No one needs to get hurt. Cerulean doesn't want to harm her, they need her alive and healthy. A few blood draws, some tissue samples. She'll be treated like royalty, until they drain me dry, I said, finding my voice at last. Until they use my blood to create more. Whatever you are. Sylvia's lips curled in a smile that never reached her eyes. Smart girl. But it doesn't matter if you come willingly or not. The extraction team is already surrounding this charming little hovel. She gestured casually to the trees behind her, where I now noticed shadows moving, human shapes with the distinctive outline of weapons. I simply thought I'd offer my brother a chance to save himself. For old time's sake, by betraying Elise. Callum's voice had dropped to a dangerous growl. By helping them create more abominations, by joining the winning side, she snapped, all pretense of sisterly affection vanishing. Our kind is dying out, Callum. Hunted to extinction. Cerulean offers a future one where we have power instead of living like frightened animals in the woods. At what cost? He demanded. Look at yourself, Sylv. Look what they've done to you. Something flashed across her features, a moment of doubt, quickly suppressed. I made my choice. Her gaze hardened as it returned to me. Now it's time for you to make yours. Come quietly, or we take you by force. I felt Callum's muscles tense beside me, saw the decision forming in his eyes before he spoke. Despite his injuries, despite being outnumbered, he was preparing to fight. Callum, I murmured, squeezing his hand to get his attention. Your injuries don't matter, he finished for me, voice low enough that only I could hear. I won't let them take you. The fierce protectiveness in those 4 simple words melted something inside me. Whatever his initial motivations, whatever truths he'd withheld, in this moment his priority was clear: keeping me safe. Even at the cost of his own life, the men in the tree line had begun to advance, their movements coordinated and professional. I counted at least 6, all armed with what looked like specialized rifles, tranquilizers, perhaps, designed to incapacitate without killing their valuable quarry. Callum's eyes met mine, something desperate and determined burning in their amber depths. Do you trust me now? He asked, echoing his earlier question from the caves. This time, there was no hesitation. Yes. The corner of his mouth lifted in a grim smile. Then he pulled me close, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered urgently, when I shift, run for the trees behind the cabin. Don't look back. There's a ravine half a mile due east. Follow it south until you reach a waterfall. There's a hollow behind it. Stay there until I find you. I'm not leaving you, I protested. Yes, you are. His voice brooked no argument. They want you more than they want me. If we separate, most will follow you. But Sylvia will come after me. Family business. I can handle her. You're injured, I reminded him, and you're worth protecting. The simple conviction in his voice stole my breath. Now get ready. Before I could argue further, he released me and stepped forward, addressing his sister. You're right about one thing, Sylv. It's time to choose sides. With those words, he lunged forward, his body blurring as he moved. The transformation was faster than I could follow. One moment he was a man charging his sister. The next, a massive black wolf with a silver streak down his muzzle had crashed into her half-transformed body. The impact sent them both tumbling into the snow, a snarling mass of fur and claws and teeth. The shock of the attack momentarily froze the advancing extraction team, exactly as Callum had intended. Now, he growled, the word barely recognizable through his wolf's muzzle. I ran. Behind me, chaos erupted. Shouts from the extraction team, the discharge of weapons, Sylvia's enraged howl as she fully transformed into a sleek silver wolf with a natural speed. But I didn't look back, following Callum's instructions and sprinting for the tree line behind the cabin. The forest swallowed me, darkness and pine boughs providing cover as I crashed through underbrush and snow. Gunshots echoed behind me, then the sound of pursuit, boots crunching through snow, men shouting coordinates to each other. They were following, just as Callum had predicted. I pushed myself harder, the cold air burning in my lungs. Half-shifter, Callum had called me. If there was ever a time for that heritage to manifest, now would be ideal. I focused on my senses as I ran, and to my surprise, something responded. My night vision sharpened, sense intensified, my awareness of the forest around me expanding beyond normal human capacity. I could smell the men pursuing me. The gun oil and sweat and synthetic fabrics. Could hear their labored breathing and racing heartbeats. Could sense the vibrations of their footfalls through the earth. The ravine appeared exactly where Callum had said it would be, a dark gash in the earth, partially concealed by snow-laden pines. I slid down its steep bank, using tree roots as handholds to control my descent. The men's voices grew more distant above me, confused by my sudden disappearance from their line of sight. I moved swiftly along the ravine floor, heading south as instructed. My enhanced senses guided me through the darkness, helping me avoid obstacles and treacherous footing. The waterfall announced itself first by sound, a gentle rushing that grew louder as I approached, then by the fine mist that hung in the air around it, catching moonlight in tiny prismatic droplets. The hollow behind the falls was narrow but deep, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I squeezed through the opening, finding myself in a small cave barely big enough to stand in. But it was dry and hidden, a perfect temporary shelter. I sank to the ground, adrenaline ebbing and leaving exhaustion in its wake. My mind raced with everything that had happened: Sylvia's appearance, her transformation, the revelation of her alliance with Cerulean, and Callum, injured but still fighting to protect me, risking his life against his own sister. The anger that had burned so hot earlier had cooled, tempered by the reality of his actions. Whatever his initial motivations, whatever information he'd withheld, when faced with a choice between self-preservation and protecting me, he'd chosen me without hesitation. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sounds of pursuit faded, then vanished entirely. Still, I remained hidden, following Callum's instructions, clinging to the belief that he would find me as promised. Just when doubt began to creep in, what if he'd been captured, or worse? I sensed movement outside the hollow. A shuffling sound, labored breathing, then a familiar scent: pine and smoke, and something wild that I'd come to associate with Callum. Elise? His voice was weak, pained. Are you in there? I scrambled out of the hollow to find him leaning heavily against the ravine wall. He'd shifted back to human form and managed to dress in the clothes he'd been wearing, though they were now torn and bloodied. Fresh wounds marked his face and arms, and he held his left side where the silver bullet wound was. You're hurt, I said, moving to support him before he could collapse. I'll heal. Despite his words, he sagged against me, clearly at the limits of his endurance. We need to keep moving. They'll regroup and widen the search pattern soon. What happened with Sylvia? I asked, helping him into the hollow where we could talk more safely. His expression darkened. She got away. But not before telling me more than she should have. What do you mean? He lowered himself to the cave floor, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. Cerulean has accelerated their timeline. Something called Project Moonfall is launching in 3 days. A demonstration for military officials of their new hybrid soldiers using your blood as the stabilizing agent. But they don't have my blood. I pointed out. They have enough samples from Nathan's research to prove the concept. But they need you for full implementation. His eyes met mine, grave and intense. That's why they sent their best asset to retrieve you, Sylvia. She's their proof of concept, but an imperfect one. With your blood, they could create dozens like her, but more stable, more controlled. The implications chilled me. Human shifter hybrid soldiers, with enhanced senses, accelerated healing, and the ability to shift form. The perfect operatives for Black Ops missions, Callum confirmed. Deniable, deadly, nearly impossible to kill. I processed this, the enormity of it sinking in. So what now? We can't outrun them forever. No, he agreed, determination hardening his features despite his exhaustion. Now we stop running and take the fight to them. How? We're 2 people against an entire organization, not entirely alone. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small communicator different from the satellite phone we'd found earlier. I managed to activate my emergency beacon during the fight. If it worked, we'll have reinforcements by morning. The resistance, I said, remembering our earlier conversation. He nodded. Other shifters who've been fighting Cerulean from the shadows. Not many of us left, but enough to cause trouble. We fell silent for a moment, the only sound the gentle rush of the waterfall concealing our hiding place. Finally, I voiced the question that had been burning in my mind since Sylvia's appearance. Why didn't you tell me about her? About knowing who I was before we met. Callum's gaze dropped to his hands, now clasped loosely between his knees. Shame, he admitted quietly. I failed to protect her once. Failed to find her after I escaped. The idea that she might have become that? His voice caught. I couldn't bear it. And me? Why keep the truth about what Cerulean wanted from me? His eyes lifted to mine, raw with emotion that stripped away any pretense. Because I was afraid you'd run. And because the more time I spent with you, the more confused I became about my own motivations. He swallowed hard. The bond between us, it's real, Elise. Unexpected and impossible and completely real. I've never felt anything like it. The simple honesty in his voice reached past my defenses. Neither have I. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he reached for my hand. That familiar electric current flowed between us at the contact. Stronger than ever. I'm sorry, he said softly, for not telling you everything from the start. You deserve the truth. Yes, I did. I didn't pull my hand away. But I understand why you hesitated. Finding out I'm half shifter, That I've been hunted for what's in my blood. It's still sinking in. You handled it better than most would, he offered, a hint of his old wry humor returning. Most people would have had a complete breakdown by now. Who says I'm not? I quipped, surprising myself with the ability to joke in our current circumstances. His thumb traced gentle circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. I can feel it, you know, your strength, through the bond. What exactly is this bond? I asked, giving voice to the question that had hovered between us for days. You called it a soul bond before. What does that mean for us? Callum's expression softened. Legend says it's the recognition of two spirits that are meant to run together. That once formed, it can never be broken, not by distance, not by time. His voice dropped lower. Not even by death. That sounds like mate bond, he finished for me. Yes, the rarest kind of connection among shifters, and completely unheard of between a shifter and a human or half-human. In your case, the word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Mates. Something primal stirred in my blood at the concept. Something that recognized the truth of it before my rational mind could process the implications. Is that why it hurt to be angry with you? I asked, remembering the physical ache I'd felt during our argument. Why? I can sense your pain, your emotions. He nodded. The bond is still forming, still strengthening. But yes, it creates a connection on the deepest level: physical, emotional, spiritual. I should have been overwhelmed by this revelation on top of everything else. Instead, I felt a strange sense of rightness, as if pieces long scattered were finally coming together. When this is over, I said quietly. If we survive when we survive, he corrected, squeezing my hand. When we survive, I amended. We'll need to figure out what this means. For both of us. Callum's eyes held mine, warm amber in the darkness. I'd like that. Outside our small sanctuary, danger still waited. Cerulean, Sylvia, Project Moonfall, threats that would require all our strength and cunning to overcome. But in this moment, connected by touch and gaze and the inexplicable bond between us, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night Nathan died. Hope. Dawn arrived with the sound of footsteps, not the heavy tread of Cerulean's extraction team, but the near silent approach of those who knew how to move through forests undetected. Callum tensed beside me, then relaxed as he caught their scent. It's them, he whispered. My people. We emerged from our hiding place behind the waterfall to find three figures waiting in the ravine. They looked ordinary enough at first glance: two men and a woman dressed in practical winter gear, but there was something distinctly predatory in their stillness. In the way their eyes tracked our movements with too sharp focus. The woman stepped forward first, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a tight braid. Something in her features reminded me of Callum, the same high cheekbones, the same intensity in her amber eyes. Aunt Mara, Callum greeted her, relief evident in his voice. She embraced him briefly but fiercely, then held him at arm's length to assess his injuries. You look terrible, she stated flatly. Good to see you too, he replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Her gaze shifted to me, assessing but not unfriendly. So this is her, the hybrid. This is Elise, Callum corrected firmly, his hand finding mine. And yes, she's the one Cerulean is hunting. The one Sylvia is hunting, you mean? There was no mistaking the pain in her voice at mentioning her niece. We picked up chatter on their coms. She's leading the operation personally. The other two shifters approached: a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and a younger man who looked barely out of his teens, though his eyes held the wariness of someone far older. Marcus. Dev. Callum nodded to each in turn. Thank you for coming. When the Alpha calls, the pack answers, the older man Marcus replied simply. His gaze lingered on our joined hands, one eyebrow raising slightly. Alpha. The word resonated strangely, adding yet another layer to my understanding of Callum. Not just a shifter, but a leader among his kind. We should move, Mara said briskly. We've secured transportation about a mile east of here. The sooner we get you both to the safe house, the better. No, Callum's refusal was quiet but firm. We don't run. Not this time. The three newcomers exchanged glances. You can't be serious. Dev, the younger shifter, spoke for the first time. Cerulean has a small army combing these mountains for you too. They're launching Project Moonfall in less than 72 hours, Callum replied. If we don't stop it now, they'll create an entire force of hybrid soldiers like Sylvia. We'll never be able to fight them then. Mara's expression hardened. What exactly are you proposing? We hit their main research facility. Tonight, Callum's voice held absolute conviction. Stop Project Moonfall before it starts. The plan came together over the next few hours as we made our way to what the shifters called a safe house, a former ranger station nestled deep in the national forest, far from any marked trails. The structure was small but defensible, with clear sightlines in all directions and multiple escape routes. Inside, maps and satellite imagery covered a table in what had once been the station's office. Callum, despite his injuries, took charge with a natural authority that the others instantly respected. Cerulean's main research facility is here, he said, pointing to what looked like an ordinary corporate campus nestled at the base of the mountains. Underground levels are where the real work happens: labs, containment cells, surgical suites. Security? Marcus asked, studying the images. Heavy but predictable. Guards, electronic surveillance, biometric locks. Callum's finger traced various entry points. But they have a weakness: the ventilation system. It has to be separate from the main building systems because of the research they conduct. Access points here, and here. That's still a suicide mission, Dev pointed out. 5 of us against an entire facility? 6. I corrected firmly. All eyes turned to me. I'm going too. Callum's expression darkened. Absolutely not. You're exactly what they want. If they capture you, then they get what they want either way, I interrupted. I'm tired of being hunted. Tired of others risking their lives to protect me. If this is about my blood, then I should be there. Elise, she's right. Mara cut in, surprising everyone. We need her, not just as bait, but for what she can do. Callum's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Mara studied me with renewed interest. You haven't told him? Told me what? Callum demanded. I shifted uncomfortably under their combined scrutiny. I'm not sure what she means. Your abilities, Mara said simply. They're awakening, aren't they? Enhanced senses, accelerated healing. But there's more, isn't there? Something unique to hybrid blood. The memory of the cave collapse surfaced, the strange awareness I'd experienced as I searched for Callum, the way my hands had healed before my eyes. And later, fleeing through the forest, how my senses had sharpened beyond anything I'd experienced before. I can feel things, I admitted hesitantly. Not just see or hear or smell, but sense them. Like an awareness that extends beyond my body. Mara nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. Hybrids are rare. Most don't survive infancy because the shifter genes fight with the human ones. But those who do sometimes develop abilities purebloods don't have. Your awareness is one of them. You can sense life energy, track it, feel its patterns. How would you know that? Callum asked, suspicion edging his voice. Because I've met one other hybrid in my lifetime, she replied quietly. Your mother, Callum. Before hunters killed her, the revelation landed like a physical blow. Callum went utterly still, his eyes wide with shock. My mother was human. Mara shook her head gently. She was like Elise, half shifter, half human. It's why she could bear shifter children despite mating with a pureblood. It's why you and Sylvia are stronger than most. And it's why Cerulean wants Elise so badly. Hybrid blood carries secrets even they don't fully understand. The room fell silent as Callum processed this revelation. About his own heritage, a truth apparently kept from him his entire life. I reached for his hand, offering silent support through our bond. Feeling the turmoil of emotions coursing through him. We'll discuss this later, he finally said, voice controlled but tight with suppressed emotion. Right now, we focus on the mission. The plan that emerged was daring in its simplicity. Under cover of darkness, we would infiltrate the facility through the ventilation system. Once inside, we would split into 3 teams. Mara and Marcus would free any captive shifters and gather evidence of human experimentation. Dev would plant explosives in the main laboratory to destroy their research. Callum and I would find the Project Moonfall materials and sabotage the demonstration scheduled for the following day. And if we encounter Sylvia? I asked the question no one else seemed willing to voice. A shadow passed over Callum's features. I'll handle my sister. Night fell quickly in the mountains, darkness swallowing the forest around the safe house. As the others made final preparations, Callum pulled me aside, leading me out onto the small porch where we could speak privately. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. No one would think less of you for staying behind. I would, I replied simply. This is my fight too. Has been since the moment Nathan found those files. Since the moment they killed him for what he discovered. His hand rose to cup my face, thumb brushing gently across my cheekbone. You're extraordinary, you know that? Most people would have broken under the weight of all you've learned, all you've endured. Most people don't have a werewolf guardian angel, I quipped, trying to lighten the moment. Shifter, he corrected automatically, a smile tugging at his lips. And I'm hardly an angel, no, I agreed, stepping closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You're something much more real, much more necessary. His eyes darkened as I eliminated the space between us, my hands settling on his chest, where I could feel his heart racing beneath my palm. The bond between us hummed with energy, with awareness, with something deeper than mere physical attraction. Elise, he murmured. My name, a question and a warning all at once. I answered by rising on my toes, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that contained all the words we had no time to say. Unlike our first kiss in the cave tentative, questioning this was an affirmation, a promise, a claiming. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me flush against him as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched my own. In that moment, I understood what the mate bond truly meant, not just connection, but completion. Two halves of something greater, finding each other across impossible odds. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. When this is over, he promised, voice rough with emotion, we'll have time. Time to figure out what this means, what we can be together. I'm holding you to that, I whispered back. It's time, Mara's voice called from inside, reluctantly pulling us back to reality. The journey to Cerulean's facility passed intense silence. We traveled in an unmarked van, windows tinted, taking back roads to avoid potential checkpoints. I sat beside Callum, our shoulders touching, drawing strength from his presence as we approached what might be our final battle. The facility rose from the darkness like a modern fortress, all sleek glass and steel, surrounded by manicured grounds and a perimeter fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras swiveled at regular intervals, their red lights blinking in the darkness. Armed guards patrolled in pairs, their movements precise and practiced. Remember, Callum addressed the group as we parked in a secluded spot a quarter-mile from the perimeter. Our priority is stopping Project Moonfall and gathering evidence. Engage only if necessary. And if anything goes wrong, the extraction point is here. He indicated a spot on the map. No one waits longer than 20 minutes. Clear? Nods all around. As the others performed final equipment checks, Callum turned to me. Stay close to me, he said softly. If we get separated, use your awareness. Find me. I will, I promised. Checking the small pack containing medical supplies and a tablet for downloading any digital evidence we might find, the approach to the facility required stealth that seemed impossible for ordinary humans, but came naturally to the shifters. We moved through the darkness like shadows, their enhanced senses detecting patrols long before they came into view. To my surprise, I kept pace easily, my own awakening abilities allowing me to sense the guards' locations, to feel their life energy as distinct patterns against the background hum of the forest. The ventilation access point was exactly where Callum had indicated, a large grate set into the ground, near the building's northeast corner, partially hidden by landscaping. Marcus made short work of the lock, and we descended one by one into the darkness below. The metal shaft was cramped but navigable, forcing us to crawl single file through the building's respiratory system. The air grew warmer as we progressed deeper, carrying strange scents, antiseptic chemicals, and beneath it all, the unmistakable smell of blood and fear. A junction point. We split as planned, Mara and Marcus branching left toward the containment cells, Dev heading right toward the main laboratory. Callum and I continued straight, following the path that would lead to the administrative section where Project Moonfall was housed. We emerged from the ventilation system into a dimly lit corridor, the night shift lighting casting everything in eerie blue shadows. Callum moved with absolute silence, his injured side apparently healed enough for action. I followed close behind, extending my newfound awareness ahead of us to detect any approaching guards. Wait, I whispered, catching his arm as we approached a corner. Someone's coming. He froze, trusting my senses without question. Moments later, two security guards rounded the corner, engrossed in conversation. Before they could register our presence, Callum moved, a blur of controlled violence that left both men unconscious before they could raise an alarm. Which way? He asked after dragging the guards into a supply closet. I closed my eyes, focusing on that strange sense of energy and life. This way, I said, pointing down the left corridor. There's something important. I can feel it. The corridor led to a secured door marked Project Development Authorized Personnel Only. The biometric lock required both keycard and fingerprint. We need another approach, I murmured, studying the security system. Callum's expression shifted to one of grim determination. Stand back. Before I could question him, he'd slammed his fist into the electronic panel with enough force to shatter its casing. Sparks flew, the system emitting a dying whine before the lock disengaged with a soft click. That will trigger a security alert, I warned. Then we work fast. He pushed the door open, ushering me through. The room beyond was clearly a high-level research office, multiple workstations, wall-sized monitors displaying complex molecular structures, and in the center, a sealed glass case containing what looked like vials of blood. My blood, I realized with a chill, taken from Nathan's lab. Callum moved immediately to the nearest computer, fingers flying across the keyboard as he searched for Project Moonfall files. I approached the glass case, drawn by some instinct I couldn't name. Found it, Callum announced, after a tense minute. Project Moonfall military demonstration scheduled for 0900 tomorrow. 20 test subjects already prepped for transformation using. His voice hardened. Using your blood samples as a stabilizing agent. I was barely listening, my attention fixed on the vials in the case. Something felt wrong about them, not just the violation of having my blood stolen, but something deeper, more fundamental. I placed my hand against the glass, extending my awareness toward the samples. Callum, I said slowly, this isn't my blood. He looked up sharply. What? It's close, similar genetic markers, similar energy signature, but it's not mine. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It's a relative's, another hybrid. Before Callum could respond, a slow clapping sound echoed through the room. We spun to find Sylvia leaning against the doorframe, a cruel smile playing across her features. Very good, she said, her amber eyes gleaming in the low light. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. You're much quicker than most test subjects. What are you talking about? I demanded, though dread was already pooling in my stomach. Nathan Reeves was a brilliant researcher, she said conversationally, stepping into the room and letting the door close behind her. When he discovered anomalies in your blood, he didn't just document them, he became obsessed with understanding them. Ran comparison tests against every database he could access, and found a partial match, Callum concluded, his voice tight with dawning horror. Another hybrid. Sylvia's smile widened. A baby girl abandoned at a Minnesota hospital during a winter storm 30 years ago. The daughter of a female shifter who died protecting her child from hunters, her gaze locked with mine. Your mother wasn't running from random hunters, Elise. She was running from cerulean. And she was my aunt, my father's sister. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet as the implications crashed over me. We're related, cousins, Sylvia confirmed, clearly enjoying my shock. Welcome to the family, Elise. Your blood is the key to perfecting what cerulean started with mine. Together, we're going to change the world. Callum stepped between us, his posture shifting subtly into a fighting stance. That's not going to happen. Oh brother, Sylvia sighed, her form already beginning to blur at the edges as her transformation began. Always so predictably heroic. Did you really think I came alone? As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility, red emergency lights casting everything in a blood-colored glow. Through the bond, I felt Callum's surge of desperate determination, followed by a single, crystal-clear thought that seemed to pass directly from his mind to mine. Run. I didn't run. As alarms screamed around us and Sylvia's transformation accelerated, bones cracking, form elongating into something neither fully wolf nor fully human. I made a different choice than the one Callum urged through our bond. I stepped to his side. Together, I said firmly, meeting his startled glance. Or not at all. Something flashed in his amber eyes, fear for me, pride, and beneath it all, a fierce love that needed no words to express. He gave a single nod, and we faced Sylvia as partners, as equals. She laughed, the sound distorting as her jaw elongated. How touching. The alpha and his hybrid mate, making their last stand. It's not too late, Sylvia, Callum said, a final attempt to reach whatever remained of his sister beneath the monster cerulean had created. You don't have to be their weapon. I'm not their weapon, she snarled. Her transformation now complete, a monstrous blend of human intelligence and lupine savagery. Larger than Callum's wolf form, her silver fur streaked with unnatural black markings like chemical burns. I'm their future. And after tonight, so is Elise. She lunged without further warning, impossibly fast. Callum shoved me aside and met her charge, shifting mid-movement into his black wolf form. They collided with bone-jarring force, a blur of fur and fangs and primal rage. Tables overturned, equipment shattered as they fought not just predators battling for dominance, but siblings whose paths had diverged into irreconcilable opposition. I scrambled to my feet, desperate to help but unsure how. Unlike the shifters, I couldn't transform, couldn't match Sylvia's raw strength. But as I watched Callum fighting already wounded from our earlier encounters, clearly outmatched by his sister's chemically enhanced form, something stirred deep within me, the awareness that had been growing since the cave. The connection to energies beyond normal perception suddenly intensified. I could see the patterns of life force flowing through both wolves, Callum's steady and bright despite his injuries, Sylvia's chaotic and unnaturally amplified, with dark disruptions where Cerulean's experiments had twisted her natural abilities without conscious thought. I reached out with this awareness, focusing on those disruptions in Sylvia's energy. If I could just, pain exploded behind my eyes as I touched the corrupted patterns. Sylvia howled, momentarily breaking away from Callum to fix her gaze on me, fury and surprise mingling in her human eyes. What did you do? She snarled, the words barely intelligible through her transformed muzzle. I didn't know, not exactly, but instinct guided me. Now, I reached out again, focusing on the largest disruption in her energy field, a swirling darkness centered around her heart. This time, I was prepared for the pain, pushing through it to grasp the pattern and pull. Sylvia screamed, a sound of pure agony that reverberated through the room. She collapsed, body convulsing, fur receding in patches to reveal human skin beneath. The transformation was reversing, but chaotically, painfully. Elise, stop. Callum had shifted back to human form, his expression horrified as he watched his sister writhing on the floor. You're killing her. I'm freeing her, I said, with a certainty I didn't understand. The corrupted patterns, they're not her. They're what Cerulean did to her. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Armed guards flooded in, weapons trained on us. Behind them came a figure I recognized instantly from Nathan's files, Dr. Victor Harlow, Cerulean's lead researcher, a tall man with cold eyes and silver-streaked black hair. Fascinating, he said, gaze fixed on me with clinical interest. The hybrid bloodline expressing dominant abilities so quickly. We predicted this might happen with proper stimulation. You planned this? Callum growled, positioning himself between me and the newcomers despite his nakedness and injuries. Not specifically, Harlow admitted, but we've been monitoring since you two found each other. The mate bond between shifters accelerates dormant abilities, add hybrid genetics to the equation, and the results are clearly extraordinary. He gestured to Sylvia's still convulsing form. Though perhaps more destructive than anticipated. You did this to her, I accused, fury building inside me. You turned her into a weapon. I improved her, he corrected coldly. As will improve you. Once we've studied what you just did, the ability to manipulate life energy patterns, to force or reverse transformations, that's worth far more than simple shape-shifting. More guards had entered during his speech, surrounding us completely. Callum was breathing hard, exhaustion and injury taking their toll. Through our bond, I felt his desperation, his search for any escape route. There was none. Restrain them both, Harlow ordered. And someone secure subject 17 before she damages herself further. He meant Sylvia. I realized with a chill she wasn't even a person to him anymore. Just a numbered experiment. As guards moved to obey. A distant explosion rocked the building, followed by another, closer. Emergency lights flickered. A guard's radio crackled to life. Sir, the containment cells have been breached. Multiple test subjects escaping. Mara and Marcus. They'd succeeded, Harlow cursed, barking new orders into his own communication device. In the momentary confusion, Callum caught my eye, a plan forming between us without words needed. Our bond had strengthened to the point where thoughts flowed freely between us, not complete sentences, but intentions, images, feelings, the vials. His thought came clearly. Destroy them all. While he used the distraction to engage the nearest guards, I lunged for the glass case containing the blood samples. My fist connected with surprising strength, shattering the reinforced glass. Alarms wailed anew as I swept the vials onto the floor, crushing them beneath my boot. No, Harlow shouted, his clinical detachment finally breaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those samples were irreplaceable. That's the point, I said, turning to face him as another explosion shook the building. This one must have been Dev's work in the main laboratory. Harlow's face contorted with rage. He pulled a sidearm from beneath his lab coat and aimed it directly at me. If we can't have your blood willingly, we'll take it from your corpse. The genetic material will still be viable for hours. Callum roared. There was no other word for the sound that tore from his human throat. He launched himself at Harlow with inhuman speed, but not before the scientist squeezed the trigger. Time seemed to slow. I saw the muzzle flash, felt rather than heard the bullets approach. That strange awareness expanded outward from me in a powerful wave, and in that moment of perfect clarity, I did something I hadn't known was possible. I caught the bullet, not with my hand, with energy. The projectile froze in midair, inches from my heart, suspended in a shimmering field of force that seemed to emanate from my outstretched palms. Everyone in the room, including Callum, stared in shock. That's not possible, Harlow whispered, his scientific mind unable to process what his eyes were seeing. Neither am I replied, and with a thought, sent the bullet harmlessly into the wall. What happened next unfolded in a blur of action and instinct. Callum reached Harlow, disarming him with brutal efficiency. More explosions rocked the facility as Dev's charges detonated throughout the building. Guards scattered, prioritizing their own survival over recapturing us. Through it all, I maintained that strange awareness, using it to deflect attacks, to shield Callum, to clear our path toward escape. Somehow, in the chaos, we ended up back at Sylvia's side. She had stopped convulsing, her body settled into human form, though unconscious. We can't leave her, Callum said, the conflict evident in his voice. Despite everything, she was still his sister. I nodded, helping him lift her as the building began to shake more violently around us. The main entrance is blocked, I said, extending my awareness to map a path. But there's a service exit this way. We ran through smoke-filled corridors, alarms blaring, sprinklers raining down from above. Sylvia was a dead weight between us, her breathing shallow but steady. Behind us, the sounds of collapse grew louder as Dev's explosives systematically destroyed ceruleans. Research. We burst through the service exit into the cold night air, just as a larger explosion ripped through the facility's core. The force threw us forward onto the frozen ground, Callum instinctively shielding both me and his sister with his body. When I looked back, the sleek modern building was engulfed in flames, its structural integrity failing as floors collapsed into basement levels. Project Moonfall was finished. Here, a voice called from the darkness. Dev appeared, supporting Marcus, who appeared to be wounded, but mobile. Behind them came Mara, leading a small group of dazed, frightened people, the captive shifters they'd managed to free. We need to go, Mara urged, her eyes widening when she saw Sylvia's unconscious form. You brought her? She's family, Callum said simply, lifting his sister into his arms. And Cerulean's victim as much as any of us. Mara's expression softened slightly. The vans are waiting beyond the perimeter fence. Hurry. The next hours passed in a blur of movement and tension, loading the wounded into vehicles, putting miles between ourselves and the burning facility, eventually reaching a more substantial safe house deep in the mountains. Medical supplies were distributed, wounds tended, stories shared in hushed voices. Through it all, Callum didn't leave my side, nor I his. Our bond hummed between us, stronger than ever after the crucible we'd endured together. Dawn found us on the porch of the safe house, watching as the first light of day painted the snow-covered peaks in gold and rose. Sylvia was stable, sedated, but alive, the corrupted patterns in her energy slowly normalizing under my inexperienced but instinctive care. What happens now? I asked quietly, leaning into Callum's warmth as he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Cerulean will regroup, he said honestly. What we destroyed was their main facility, but not their entire operation. And we have evidence to release, witnesses to protect, a new fight, I summarized. Yes, he turned to face me fully, his amber eyes searching mine. But not when you have to join. You've done enough, sacrificed enough. You could go somewhere safe, build a new life away from all this. The offer was genuine. I could feel his willingness to let me go if that was what I wanted. Even though the thought caused him almost physical pain, through our bond, I smiled. reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. Do you really think I could walk away now? From this fight? From you? I hope not, he admitted, catching my hand and pressing a kiss to my palm. But it had to be your choice. It is, I said firmly. My choice, my path, my pack. The last word felt right, in a way I couldn't explain, an acknowledgement of something that had been building since that moment in the blizzard, when a black wolf with amber eyes had found me lost and dying. Your pack, he echoed, something fierce and tender mingling in his voice. Your mate. He leaned down slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wished. Instead, I rose to meet him, our lips coming together in a kiss that felt like coming home. The bond between us flared brilliantly, no longer just a tether, but a fusion to spirits recognizing each other across blood and species and circumstance. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I rested my forehead against his. I still have so many questions. About what I am, what I can do. About us. We have time, he promised, his arms tightening around me. A lifetime to figure it out together. Behind us, the safe house stirred to life as the others woke to face a new day. Ahead of us lay challenges I could barely imagine: helping the freed shifters, healing Sylvia if possible, continuing the fight against Cerulean. The path wouldn't be easy, but as I stood in the arms of the man who had found me in a blizzard, the wolf who had recognized something in me before I recognized it in myself, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. I had tried to run on my own, to escape the dangers hunting me. But in the end, it was the bond that had saved us. Both the impossible connection between a shifter, Alpha, and a woman who'd never known her true heritage. A bond that no force on earth could break. The full moon bathed the mountain clearing in silver light, transforming the ordinary into something magical. I sat on the porch of what had become our home, a secluded cabin far from any marked trails, surrounded by acres of wilderness that belonged to no one but the wolves who ran there. Inside, I could hear Mara and Marcus discussing strategy with the newer members of our growing resistance. Maps would be spread across the dining table, information gathered from our network of allies arranged in careful patterns. The fight against Cerulean continued, but on our terms. Now, the sound of approaching footsteps drew my attention to the tree line. Callum emerged from the shadows, barefoot and shirtless despite the lingering spring chill. Behind him walked Sylvia, her silver-streaked hair longer now, her movements still cautious but steadier than they had been in weeks. I rose to meet them, the bond between Callum and me humming with quiet joy at his return. 6 months had transformed our connection into something as natural as breathing, a constant awareness of each other that transcended physical distance. How did it go? I asked, eyes moving between the siblings. 3 steps this time, Callum answered, pride evident in his voice. Full wolf form held for almost 10 minutes. Sylvia's smile was tentative but genuine. It felt clean. For the first time since. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The road to healing hadn't been easy for her. The corruption Cerulean had introduced into her system had run deep, altering not just her body but her mind. For weeks after our escape, she had raged against us, against herself, caught in withdrawal from the chemical cocktails they had used to control her transformations. But slowly, with patience and the strange healing abilities I was still learning to control, the darkness had begun to recede. The sister Callum remembered was returning piece by piece, not unchanged, not unmarked by her experiences, but recognizable again. That's wonderful, I said, stepping forward to squeeze her hand gently. Through my enhanced senses, I could feel the patterns of her energy still bearing scars, but flowing more naturally now, the chaotic disruptions steadily diminishing with each passing week. It's because of you, she said quietly, meeting my eyes with the direct gaze that reminded me so much of Callum. I don't remember much from that night at the facility, but I remember what you did. You saw the corruption. You pulled it out. We're family, I replied simply. Blood calls to blood. The revelation that we were cousins had explained so much: the similar patterns in our energy, the way my abilities seemed instinctively attuned to hers. In healing Sylvia, I had discovered aspects of my own heritage that might otherwise have remained dormant for years. Speaking of family, Callum said, his arms slipping comfortably around my waist. Dev radioed in while we were out. The safe house in Colorado is secure. 3 more hybrids have been located and extracted before Cerulean could reach them. This was our new purpose, finding others like me, like Sylvia. Half-breeds who'd grown up unaware of their heritage, who might become targets as Cerulean desperately tried to rebuild what we had destroyed. Our network grew with each month that passed. Shifters and hybrids united by a common cause. I should check in with the team, Sylvia said, a flash of her old confidence showing through as she headed for the cabin door. They'll want my report on the transformation progress. As she disappeared inside, Callum turned to face me fully, his hands settling on my hips with comfortable familiarity. How are you feeling? He asked, amber eyes studying me with the careful attention that had become his habit lately. Fine, I assured him, leaning up to press a brief kiss to his lips. Perfectly normal for a half-shifter pregnant with what might be the world's first quarter-shifter baby. His hand moved instinctively to rest against my still flat stomach, wonder replacing concern in his expression. You're sure? No nausea today? No strange energy patterns? I laughed, covering his hand with mine. The morning sickness seems to be fading. And before you ask again, yes, I checked the baby's energy patterns this morning. Strong, steady, and apparently untroubled by having parents from different species. The discovery of my pregnancy 2 months ago had been both joyous and terrifying. No records existed of successful births between hybrids and full shifters, though Mara believed her sister Callum's mother had been proof that such children could thrive. Still, each day brought new questions, new concerns that no medical textbook could address. I spoke with the midwife from the northern pack, Callum said, guiding me to the porch swing where we could sit together beneath the moonlight. She's agreed to come stay with us for the final trimester. She has experience with shifter births going back 40 years, and none with hybrid births, I reminded him gently. We're in uncharted territory, love, but we'll find our way through it together, just like everything else. He nodded, drawing me closer against his side. Together, he echoed, the word both promise and prayer. Above us, the full moon sailed through scattered clouds, bathing the world in its ancient light. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from frightened human on the run to someone who understood her own power, who had found her place in a world she never knew existed. Do you ever regret it? Callum asked suddenly, his voice thoughtful. Finding me in that blizzard? Learning about all of this? I considered the question seriously, as he deserved. I regret the losses, I said finally. Nathan, the life I thought I would have. The simplicity of believing I was just an ordinary human. I turned to meet his gaze directly. But finding you? Discovering my true heritage? Building this life, this pack? Never. His smile was slow and beautiful, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way that never failed to make my heart skip. Even with Cerulean still out there? With the fight ahead of us? Especially then, I said firmly. Some things are worth fighting for. As if in agreement, a chorus of howls rose from the distant forest, the night patrol of our growing pack, announcing all was well in their territory. Callum's eyes gleamed in the moonlight, the wolf within him responding to the call of his kin. Go, I urged, recognizing the restlessness in him. Run with them for a while. I'll be here when you return. He hesitated only briefly before pressing a lingering kiss to my lips. Always, he promised. The word carrying the weight of the bond between us, unbreakable, eternal. Transcending the boundaries between human and wolf, I watched as he jogged into the clearing, his form blurring and shifting in that now familiar dance of bone and sinew and spirit. Where the man had stood, a massive black wolf now turned to regard me with intelligent amber eyes. He lifted his muzzle in a quiet howl, not a call to the pack, but a private message meant for me alone. Mine, mate, forever. The words weren't spoken aloud, but they resonated through our bond with perfect clarity. I smiled, sending back my own silent response. Yours, always, run free. The black wolf dipped his head once before turning to lope into the forest, joining the shadows and moonlight and wild freedom that was his birthright. I remained on the porch, one hand resting on my stomach, where our child grew, feeling the tether between us stretching but never breaking. As he ran beneath the moon, I had stopped running months ago. Stopped trying to escape the connection that had formed between us from that first moment in the blizzard. Now I embraced it fully, the bond that had dragged me back when I tried to flee, the love that had saved us both, the family we were building in the shadow of continuing danger. Some would call it fate, others might name it destiny, but in the quiet of my heart, beneath the watchful gaze of the full moon, I called it simply what it was: home.